My name is Victoria Blake. I'm 33 years old, and until last month, I thought being loyal meant staying soft, even when someone kept taking pieces of me. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment near Sloan's Lake in Denver. It is not huge, not fancy, not the kind of place people look at and think anything dramatic could happen there. But it is quiet, clean, and mine. Every corner of that apartment carries something I earned myself. The little table by the window where I drink coffee before work. The pale blue couch I saved for after my last promotion. The tiny kitchen where I make pancakes on Sundays when the city is still asleep. It was my safe place. That was why I did not hesitate when Ethan Cole called me in early January. Ethan was my boyfriend. He was 34, charming in that tired, wounded way that made people want to protect him. We had been together long enough for him to know the exact way I took my coffee, the shows I watched when I was anxious, the way I went silent when I was hurt instead of raising my voice. He had recently gone through a messy breakup with his ex-girlfriend, Marissa Vale, before we became serious. And even though he told me he was done with that chapter, her shadow still seemed to follow him everywhere. That morning, his voice shook through the phone. "Vic," he said, barely above a whisper. "I made it to Denver, but everything else fell apart." He told me the salon-adjacent wellness studio where he worked had cut his hours so badly it was basically a layoff. He said the room he was supposed to rent had fallen through. He said he just needed 2 weeks on my couch while he found another job and a cheap sublet. 2 weeks max, he promised. I swear, I just need a minute to breathe. I remember standing in my kitchen, with one hand wrapped around a mug I had not even sipped from yet. Outside, snow clung to the edges of parked cars. Inside, his panic filled the apartment before he ever stepped through the door. So, I said yes. Because friends help friends. Because partners help partners. Because I loved him. Because I thought love meant opening the door before someone had to beg. The first week was almost sweet in a sad way. Ethan cried on my couch. He watched comfort shows under my gray blanket. He filled out job applications with his laptop balanced on his knees. He thanked me constantly. He called me his miracle. He said things like, "I don't know what I'd do without you." And each time, my heart softened in the dangerous way it does when someone makes your kindness feel like salvation. I made him a little Denver starter kit, embarrassingly sincere. An extra blanket folded at the end of the couch, a key hook by the door, the Wi-Fi password written on a sticky note, a drawer in the bathroom, space in the fridge. He looked at all of it and pulled me into his arms. "You're saving me," he murmured into my hair. At the time, I believed that was love. By week 2, the energy shifted. It was subtle at first, the kind of change you feel before you can explain. Ethan still talked about getting back on his feet, but he stopped moving like someone in a hurry to stand. He would send one job application in the morning, then spend the rest of the day scrolling rental listings, watching videos, ordering random things online, and texting people I didn't know. By Friday, he was going out again. "Just brunch," he said, grabbing his jacket. "Some people from a networking group invited me. I need to make connections." He came home with glitter on his cheek, smelling like expensive cocktails and cold air. "I needed this," he said, dropping onto my couch like he had survived something heroic. I deserve this. I did not judge him for needing a break. People break in different ways. Sometimes you need one normal night to remember you still exist. What I judged was the way he started treating my apartment like a hotel, where the bill magically paid itself. Then the money started. Not one big request. A drip. "Can you spot me 60? I'll Venmo tonight." "Can you cover groceries? My transfer is pending." "Can you grab my prescription? I'm locked out of my banking app." "My phone bill is due today. I'll pay you back Friday." Each request sounded temporary. Each promise sounded reasonable. And because I remembered what broke feels like, because I remembered eating toast for dinner in my 20s and pretending I was not scared, I said yes. I told myself this was what couples did. I told myself once Ethan found steady work, he would catch up. And one day, we would laugh about how awful that January had been. But tonight became tomorrow. Tomorrow became after my refund. After my refund became when the check clears, and the amount stopped feeling small. One Tuesday, Ethan came into my kitchen holding a receipt like it was a weather report. "My car is making a grinding sound," he said. "I took it in. It's the brakes." I waited. "It's $800. I stared at him. "800? He shrugged, almost helplessly. "I need my car, Vic. I can't job hunt without it." "I can cover part of it," I said slowly. "Not all." His face changed. Not dramatically, just enough. A tightening around the mouth, a flash in the eyes. "Please don't make it weird," he said. That sentence landed like a slap. Because I was not making it weird. Money makes it weird. Expecting your girlfriend to hand you hundreds of dollars while you act offended by hesitation makes it weird. Still, when he started crying in my kitchen, I folded. Big tears, shaking hands, his voice breaking as he said he was tired of feeling useless, tired of being behind, tired of everyone leaving when he became inconvenient. So I paid $750 to the shop. Not because I had no concerns, because I had no emotional energy left to argue, while the man I loved stood in front of me, unraveling. After that, I did something I had never done with someone I was dating. I opened a spreadsheet. Not to punish him, not to build a case, not at first. I opened it because I could feel my own brain trying to rewrite the facts. Was it really that much? Had he paid for something I forgot? Was I being cold? Was I becoming the kind of person who measured love in dollars? So I tracked what I paid, what he promised, and what he actually sent back. I gave him every benefit of the doubt. If he bought toilet paper once, it went on the sheet. If he paid for coffee, it went on the sheet. If he sent $20 at midnight with a heart emoji, it went on the sheet. I was not trying to win. I was trying to understand what was happening in my own life. By the end of 6 weeks, the total was $3,180. $750 for brakes. $420 for rent help when he said his deposit fell through. $310 in groceries he promised to cover. $180 for utilities I put in my name. $95 for his phone bill. And then the pile of smaller spots that never came back. But the worst part was $1,240 in charges on my card from the week he borrowed it for takeout. Except it was not just takeout. A boutique order. 2 concert tickets. Ride shares. Late-night food deliveries from places I would never order from because I was trying to save money after covering him. That was the moment something inside me went very still. Because those charges did not say, "I'm broke." They said, "I'm comfortable letting you pay." I did not explode. I did not confront him while angry. I waited until a calm night when we were both home, no friends around, no alcohol, no distractions. Ethan sat across from me at the kitchen table, scrolling his phone, while rain tapped lightly against the window. "Hey," I said, "can we talk about money for a second?" He sighed like I had asked him to carry furniture up 6 flights of stairs. "Seriously?" he muttered. "I'm not trying to fight," I said. "I need a plan. I can't keep floating everything." "I said I'd pay you back." "I know, but we're 6 weeks in and the total is—" "Don't." His head snapped up. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Keep a tally like I'm some charity case." My hands went cold under the table. "I'm keeping track because it's my money," I said, "and I'm not a bank." His expression flipped like a switch. "Wow," he said, leaning back. "Okay, so this is who you are now. I'm asking for a repayment plan and a move-out date. That's it." He stood so fast, the chair scraped hard against the floor. "You're really going to throw away our relationship over a spreadsheet?" I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw the pattern clearly. The tears, the promises, the guilt, the way every boundary became proof that I did not love him enough. "No," I said quietly. "I'm trying to stop my life from turning into yours." His face went pale with anger. Then he grabbed his phone. A second later, mine buzzed. "Stop counting what you do for me, or we're done." I stared at the message, waiting for another bubble. Waiting for... I didn't mean that. Waiting for the man who said I saved him to realize what he had just done. Nothing came. So I typed one sentence. "We're done." His head jerked up, Are you serious? Yes. He let out a sharp laugh, like he could not believe I had taken him at his word. You're punishing me. I'm listening to you. Then he said the line that still makes my stomach twist. Where am I supposed to go? I kept my voice level. That's not my problem anymore. His eyes narrowed. You're heartless. I did not take the bait. I opened my laptop because if I looked at him too long, I might remember every soft version of him and forget the man standing in my kitchen, trying to turn my compassion into a cage. You can pick up the rest of your things tomorrow, I said. I'll be here from 6 to 8. He started stuffing clothes into a duffel bag with loud, performative anger. Hoodie, chargers, shoes, toiletries. He moved like every zipper was an accusation. Then he paused by the door. For a second, I thought he wanted to apologize. Instead, he looked at me like he was waiting for me to stop him. I didn't. He left close to midnight with his duffel bag and his car keys. When the door shut, my apartment felt too quiet at first. Then, slowly, the quiet changed. It became air, space. A long breath I had been holding for 6 weeks, finally leaving my body. That night, I did 3 things. I changed the Wi-Fi password because it was tied to my accounts and he still had access. I texted my building manager that a temporary guest was no longer welcome and that I might need the locks rekeyed. Then I took screenshots. His ultimatum, my reply, the Venmo history, the card charges, the spreadsheet. Every promise, every excuse, every little proof that I had not imagined the weight I was carrying. Then I went to bed. For the first time in weeks, I slept. 4 days later, Ethan still had not come back for his things. Not a text, not a call, nothing. The silence felt intentional, like he believed withholding contact was power. Like if he ignored the pickup window long enough, I would eventually crack first and beg him to come talk to me. Instead, the apartment stayed quiet. On the second day after the missed pickup, my phone buzzed while I was at work. A message from Alyssa, one of our mutual friends. Hey Vic, Ethan says you kicked him out with nowhere to go. Can you guys just talk? I stared at the screen for a long moment. Not because I was surprised, because some part of me had hoped he would at least be honest about how this ended. Instead, he had already started rewriting the story. I opened my screenshots, found the ultimatum, and sent it without commentary. Stop counting what you do for me, or we're done. Alyssa replied almost immediately. Oh. Then another message. He definitely didn't mention that part. A few minutes later, she added, that text alone would have ended it for me, too. I should have felt relieved, vindicated, but mostly, I just felt tired. Because Ethan was not trying to solve a conflict anymore. He was trying to win the narrative. 3 days later, I learned just how far he was willing to go. At 7:11 in the morning, while I was already downtown at work, my Ring camera sent a motion alert. Ethan. Standing outside my apartment door. For one stupid second, my chest tightened with instinctive panic. I thought maybe something had happened. Maybe he needed help. Maybe, despite everything, he had finally come to apologize. Then he pulled out the key I had given him and walked inside. I watched the footage during my lunch break, with my stomach twisting harder every second. He did not steal anything major. Honestly, I almost wish he had. That would have been easier to explain than what he actually did. He wandered slowly through my apartment, opening drawers, touching things, moving objects around. He pulled some of his remaining belongings out of corners and scattered them across the living room. He opened my bathroom cabinet and left products half hanging out. He tugged blankets off the couch. He made the apartment look chaotic, like I had exploded and thrown his things around in anger, like I was unstable, like he was the victim. I remember sitting frozen at my desk afterward, headphones on, pretending to work, while my pulse hammered in my ears. Because suddenly, I understood the game. If I texted him furious, he would call me controlling. If I stayed silent, he could tell people I had thrown his belongings everywhere and locked him out. It was a trap either way. So, I did neither. After work, I met my building manager downstairs and showed him the footage. He watched it once, then twice. Then he looked at me and said quietly, "Yeah, we're rekeying your lock tonight." The relief that hit me was almost embarrassing. He also documented the incident officially as unauthorized entry by a former guest. The rekey cost me another $165. I hated paying it. But I loved the idea of finally sleeping without wondering if Ethan could walk back into my life whenever he felt like it. That night, he texted me from a different number. "Why can't I get in?" Then another. "Are you seriously evicting me?" I replied once. "You moved out. You told me we were done. The lease is in my name. Pickup window is tomorrow, from 6 to 8. Almost immediately, the voicemail started. First crying, then anger, then crying again. "You're abandoning me. I can't believe you do this when I'm depressed. You know I'm struggling. You used to care about me." I listened to each voicemail exactly one time. Then I saved them and did not respond. The next evening, Ethan finally showed up. He wore an oversized black hoodie like armor and carried himself with that carefully wounded posture people use when they want strangers to ask if they are okay. When I opened the door, he looked past me into the apartment like he still belonged there. "You packed my stuff like I'm a stranger," he said quietly. I met his eyes. "You made yourself one." For a second, something ugly flashed across his face. Then it disappeared behind sadness again. He carried one bin to his car, then another. Then he stopped in the doorway, hovering there like he was waiting for me to soften. I stayed calm. I stayed distant. I gave him nothing emotional to hold on to. "You really think you're innocent in all this?" he asked. I didn't say that. "You're acting cold." "No," I said softly. "I'm acting done." That hit him harder than yelling would have. He stared at me for a long moment, jaw tight. Then finally said, "You're going to regret this." "Okay." That seemed to frustrate him even more. Because people like Ethan expect emotion. They expect tears or rage or begging. Anything that proves they still have access to your nervous system. Calmness terrifies them. He left several things behind on purpose. A suitcase. Coats. Expensive hair products. Shoes. Not enough to look accidental. Just enough to guarantee another reason to return. I saw it immediately. So that same night, I rented a small, climate-controlled storage unit 10 minutes away. 5 by 10. First month half off. I packed every remaining item carefully, photographed each bin before loading it into my car, and drove everything there myself. Not because I wanted drama, because I could already see the direction Ethan's story was heading, and I needed proof for every single step. When I locked the storage unit, I stood there for a moment staring at the metal door. I remember thinking something strange. This was the first boundary I had ever fully followed through on. Not threatened. Not softened. Not explained to death. Just enforced. I texted Ethan the address and access code. "Your belongings are safe. You have 30 days. His response came instantly. "Wow, you're really enjoying this." I stared at that text for a long time. Because in Ethan's mind, boundaries were not neutral. To him, every boundary felt like cruelty. For about a week after that, things went quiet. No calls. No surprise visits. No emotional monologues. I started sleeping better, eating normally again. I even caught myself humming while making coffee one morning and realized I had not done that in weeks. Then Ethan decided silence was no longer working. So he went public. The Instagram story appeared first. Some people help you just to throw it back in your face when you're at your lowest. Then another. Real love doesn't keep score. Then a blurry coffee shop selfie captioned, "Healing around people who don't weaponize kindness." The comments were worse than the posts. "You deserve better. She sounds toxic. Proud of you for leaving controlling people." And my personal favorite, "If someone tracks what they spend on you, they never loved you." I sat on my couch reading those comments with a numb feeling spreading slowly through my chest. Because none of those people knew the truth. They only knew the version Ethan performed. And he was very, very good at performing pain. Then, the flying monkeys started arriving. Drew from college called while I was driving home. "Ethan's really struggling," he said carefully. "Can't you just be the bigger person? He owes me over $3,000. A pause. "Well, he says you embarrassed him. I asked for a repayment plan. He says you made him feel small." I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. "If accountability makes him feel small," I said, "that's not my responsibility." Drew sighed like I was being difficult. "Okay, I'll tell him you're still upset." "I'm not upset," I said quietly. "I'm finished." Then I hung up. 2 days later, Ethan showed up at my job. I work as a project coordinator for a medical software company downtown. Security badges, lobby desk, glass elevators, professional environment. The receptionist called my extension, sounding nervous. "Victoria, there's a man here asking for you. He says he's family." My stomach dropped immediately. When I walked into the lobby, Ethan stood up, like we were in the final scene of a romance movie. Watery eyes. Perfect hair. Perfect sadness. "Vic," he whispered, like he had not spent 2 weeks dragging my name across the internet. I stopped several feet away. "What are you doing here? Can we talk? 5 minutes." "No." His expression tightened. "You're seriously going to do this in public? You came here. That's humiliating." I almost laughed at the hypocrisy. He stepped closer. "You're ruining my life." "No," I said. "You're doing that yourself." Then I looked at the security guard. "She needs to leave." The guard blinked. Ethan's head snapped up. "So now I'm being treated like a criminal? You're trespassing." His voice rose deliberately loud enough for people across the lobby to hear. "I can't believe you'd abandon someone you love like this." Heads started turning. The receptionist looked horrified. Exactly what Ethan wanted. A performance. A public execution of my character. The security guard finally stepped between us and asked him to leave. Ethan dragged his feet dramatically toward the doors. Then, right before exiting, he turned back and said loudly, "When I'm gone, remember you did this." Every eye in the lobby landed on me. I wanted the floor to open beneath my feet. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A Venmo request from Ethan. $500. Caption: emotional distress plus groceries. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was insane. I declined the request and typed, "Repay what you owe. Stop contacting me." That night, the blocked number voicemails started again. Crying. Screaming. Then one message that was terrifyingly calm. "You think you can erase me?" he said softly. "You can't." I barely slept after that. The next morning, my mother called. "Victoria," she said carefully, "Ethan messaged me." I closed my eyes. My mother is a retired school counselor. Calm voice, steel spine, the kind of woman who can spot manipulation from across a room. "He told me you abandoned him," she continued, "and that you stole his things." "What did you say?" "I asked why he texted you an ultimatum," she replied evenly, "and why he owes you $3,000. I sat down slowly at my kitchen table. "What did he say?" "He hung up." Silence stretched between us. Then my mother sighed softly. "Honey," she said, "this is becoming harassment. Protect yourself." And for the first time, I realized this was no longer just a breakup. It was damage control. The morning after my mother told me to protect myself, I stopped thinking emotionally and started thinking legally. That shift changed everything. Up until then, some part of me still viewed Ethan through the lens of our relationship. The late-night conversations, the mornings tangled together on my couch, the way he used to kiss my forehead while half asleep and tell me I made him feel safe. But safety is not love when only one person is paying for it. So I called a small law office downtown during my lunch break and paid $250 for a formal demand letter. The attorney who met with me was calm, practical, and completely unimpressed by emotional theatrics. "How much does he owe you?" she asked. $3,180. "Do you have documentation?" I slid the folder across the desk. Screenshots. Venmo history. Credit card statements. The spreadsheet. Texts promising repayment. Voicemails. The unauthorized entry footage. She flipped through everything quietly. Then she looked up at me and said something that lodged itself deep inside my chest. You kept records because your instincts already knew you were being manipulated. I sat very still after that. Because she was right. The spreadsheet had never been about money alone. It was about reality. The demand letter went out certified mail that Friday. Total owed, $3,180. Attached evidence. 10 business days to respond with a repayment plan before I filed in small claims court. Ethan responded the same way he responded to everything serious. With performance. 2 days later, he uploaded a photo from a coffee shop. Perfect lighting, sad eyes, expensive sweater. Caption. Healing looks lonely sometimes. I stared at it while eating microwaved soup in my apartment and actually felt embarrassed for him. Not because heartbreak is embarrassing. Because manipulation disguised as heartbreak eventually becomes transparent. The next afternoon, he texted me a photo of the storage unit gate. The code isn't working. I checked the app. The code worked perfectly. Another manufactured crisis. Another opportunity for me to become the villain if I reacted emotionally. So I replied once. The code is active. Ask the office for assistance. Then I muted the conversation. No more arguing. No more defending myself. No more volunteering pieces of my sanity to someone committed to misunderstanding me. A week later, I filed in small claims court. Filing fee, $97. I attached everything. Every screenshot. Every statement. Every charge. The spreadsheet. The demand letter. And most importantly, the text that started all of it. Stop counting what you do for me, or we're done. The court date was scheduled 5 weeks later. 5 strange, tense weeks. Ethan tried one more ambush during that time. I was checking my mailbox after work when he suddenly stepped out from the hallway near the elevators. For one disorienting second, my body reacted before my brain did. My pulse jumped, my stomach clenched. My nervous system still remembered him as someone emotionally dangerous. "Vic," he said softly. I stepped backward immediately. "You need to leave. We need to talk." "No?" He laughed quietly, like I was being dramatic. "You're seriously afraid of me now? I'm documenting this." That changed his expression instantly. He moved closer anyway. "You're turning me into some kind of monster." I pulled out my phone and started dialing the non-emergency line without another word. The second he realized I was serious, he swore under his breath and walked away. Later that night, my building manager issued an official no trespass notice after reviewing the hallway footage. I remember sitting on my couch afterward feeling strangely hollow. Because there is something deeply painful about realizing the person you once loved now requires documentation. Then court day arrived. Wednesday morning. Cold air, gray sky, my stomach in knots. I wore a black sweater, dark slacks, and minimal makeup because I wanted to look calm, professional, impossible to paint as hysterical. When I walked into the courtroom and saw Ethan already seated there, my chest tightened unexpectedly. He looked different. Hair tied back neatly, neutral sweater, no flashy confidence, no dramatic energy. Just carefully crafted vulnerability. He glanced at me once, then looked away, like he was too wounded to maintain eye contact. The performance had already started. When our case was called, we both stepped forward. The judge was an older woman with sharp eyes and the exhausted expression of someone who had spent decades listening to people lie badly. Ethan spoke first. "I never thought someone who loved me would do this when I was at my lowest," he said, voice trembling perfectly. The judge held up a hand immediately. "This court is about money," she said. "Not heartbreak." Ethan blinked. It genuinely looked like she had interrupted his script. She continued. "Do you owe her money?" "Well, she helped me financially, yes, but she's exaggerating." I handed the clerk my binder. Neat tabs. Color-coded. Every document organized chronologically. The judge began reading silently. The courtroom suddenly felt unbearably quiet. I could hear paper turning. I could hear Ethan shifting beside me. Then the judge paused. You used her credit card for concert tickets? Ethan flushed. She said I could borrow it. The judge looked down again. She also has screenshots of you promising repayment after your refund. He hesitated. That was different. The judge's eyes lifted slowly. How? Ethan opened his mouth, closed it, then tried a different angle. She kept score, he said quietly. She made me feel small. I felt something cold move through me hearing that. Because even now, even standing in court over thousands of dollars, he still believed accountability itself was cruelty. The judge leaned back slightly. Keeping track of a loan does not make someone cruel, she said flatly. Silence. Then she continued reviewing the documents. Every charge. Every promise. Every excuse. Every unanswered repayment request. Finally, she set the papers down. I'm ruling in favor of the plaintiff. My lungs actually forgot how to work for a second. Judgment amount, $3,180 plus filing fees. Payment plan through the court, $200 monthly. That was it. No dramatic speech. No movie ending. Just consequences. Outside the courtroom, Ethan caught up with me near the elevators. The mask dropped instantly. His jaw was tight. His eyes burned. You really hate me, he hissed. I looked at him for a long moment and realized something strange. I felt nothing. No rage. No longing. No urge to defend myself. Just clarity. I don't hate you, I said quietly. His expression flickered. I just don't trust you anymore. Then I walked away. It has been 3 months since court. Ethan paid the first 2 months late, missed one completely, then resumed after the clerk sent a warning notice. He has not contacted me since. The vague Instagram posts stopped too. Apparently, people become less interested in your victim narrative once there is an actual court judgment attached to it. My apartment is quiet again now. Truly quiet. Not tense quiet. Not walking on eggshells quiet. Peaceful quiet. My couch belongs to me again. My kitchen feels warm again. My bank account no longer feels like a leaking pipe I am desperately trying to seal with my bare hands. But the biggest change happened inside me. I used to think loyalty meant enduring someone's chaos because you loved them. Now I think real love includes honesty, reciprocity, and limits. Because if someone only needs you when you are useful, that is not intimacy. That is access. And when someone shames you for tracking your own money, protecting your own peace, or asking for basic respect, believe them. They are telling you exactly how they plan to treat you. I learned that lesson the hard way. But at least I finally learned it. My name is Lillian Brooks. I'm 30 years old, and 3 weeks ago, I watched my entire relationship collapse inside a luxury mountain lodge while dozens of coworkers pretended not to notice. What still bothers me most is not even the cheating. It's how calmly Ethan tried to convince me I was crazy for seeing it. Ethan Carter and I had been together for 2 years. He was 28, ambitious, charming, and the kind of man who could walk into a room and immediately make people trust him. We lived together in a downtown apartment close to our office building. He worked in marketing and sales, while I worked in IT support. Different apartments, same elevators, same badge scanners, same break rooms where everyone acted friendlier than they actually were. Our company held a yearly retreat every fall. Since we both worked there, we were both invited. I expected the usual corporate circus. Forced smiles, cheap motivational speeches disguised as inspiration, managers saying words like synergy and growth mindset, while employees secretly counted the hours until they could drink at the hotel bar. Ethan, though, seemed unusually excited about this retreat. At the time, I thought maybe we needed it. Life had been stressful lately. We'd barely spent real time together outside work and grocery shopping. I thought a weekend away might reconnect us. I had no idea I was walking directly into a humiliation everyone else already understood except me. The retreat lodge sat 2 hours outside the city, surrounded by pine trees and hiking trails. It looked like something from a winter postcard. Giant wooden beams stretched across the lobby ceiling, a massive stone fireplace crackled near leather couches, and soft jazz floated through hidden speakers while employees checked in. For a few minutes, everything actually felt nice. Then Miranda Hayes walked over. Miranda was Ethan's boss, mid-40s, elegant in a controlled, intimidating way. She always looked polished, like every strand of hair and every facial expression had been rehearsed beforehand. At work, people respected her because she brought in huge clients and never lost composure. But there was something cold underneath her smile. The kind of person who made eye contact just a second too long. The moment she approached us, her hand slid naturally onto Ethan's lower back. Not a quick touch. Not casual. Possessive. "Ethan," she said warmly, "I'm so glad you made it." Then her eyes moved to me briefly. "Lillian, good to see you too." I handled occasional IT requests for her department, so she knew exactly who I was. But after that brief acknowledgement, her attention returned completely to Ethan, while her hand stayed pressed against him, like it belonged there. I remember standing there, holding my overnight bag, while heat slowly crept into my face. Then another employee walked over, Ryan, from accounting. He smiled casually. "Hey, Ethan, is this your girlfriend?" Before I could even breathe, Ethan answered. "Oh no," he said quickly. "Lillian's my neighbor. We just carpooled together." Neighbor. 2 years together. Living together. Sharing bills, holidays, anniversaries, late-night conversations about marriage someday. And suddenly, I was his neighbor. Miranda smiled after he said it. Not a surprised smile, a satisfied one. Like she'd just watched him pass a test. I didn't say anything there in the lobby. I wanted to. God, I wanted to embarrass both of them right there beside the fireplace. But shock froze me. We got our room keys and headed upstairs in silence. The second the hotel room door shut behind us, I turned toward him. "What the hell was that?" I asked. Ethan sighed immediately, like he was already exhausted by me. "Lillian, please don't start." "Don't start what? Why did you tell people I'm your neighbor?" He tossed his phone onto the bed and rubbed his forehead dramatically. "It's easier this way." "Easier for who?" "The office has weird dynamics," he said. "You wouldn't understand." The sentence hit me harder than I expected. You think I wouldn't understand office politics? Ethan, I work in the same company. "It's different in sales," he replied. "People gossip about everything." "And your boss touching you like that is normal?" His expression tightened. "Miranda is just friendly." "Friendly?" I laughed once in disbelief. "Her hand was practically on your ass." "It was my lower back." "That somehow makes it better?" He rolled his eyes then, and something about that small gesture made my stomach twist. "Miranda is hands-on with everyone she manages," he said. "That's just how she operates. Hands-on." The phrase sounded rehearsed, too smooth, too immediate. Like he'd already practiced explaining her behavior before I even asked. I wanted to keep pushing, but part of me was scared of sounding jealous, scared of becoming the insecure girlfriend everyone secretly mocked. So instead, I swallowed the feeling down and told myself maybe I was overreacting. That feeling lasted less than 4 hours. Friday night, the company hosted a welcome mixer inside the main lodge. Open bar, loud laughter, clusters of employees pretending networking counted as fun. I stood near a group from accounting while Ethan floated around the room talking to sales executives. Every few minutes, Miranda would appear beside him like she had radar. At one point, I watched her lean close to him and whisper something near his ear. He smiled instantly. Then she touched his chest lightly and said, "Come with me for a second. We need to discuss the Morrison account." Discuss the Morrison account. At 10:30 p.m. During a cocktail mixer, they disappeared together for almost 20 minutes. When Ethan finally returned, his hair looked slightly messy. Not dramatic, just enough to make me notice. He also kept touching the side of his neck like the skin felt irritated or sensitive. When our eyes met, he looked away first. That was the moment something cold settled into my stomach. Not proof. Not certainty. But instinct. Women know when something feels wrong long before they can explain why. Saturday morning brought mandatory team-building activities. Most of the sessions were unbearable. Executives shouting motivational nonsense while exhausted employees clapped on command. Since I worked in IT, I mostly observed quietly from the edges, while the marketing department performed enthusiasm like theater. Miranda never stopped touching Ethan, her hand on his shoulder, her fingers brushing his arm, leaning too close while whispering things that made him laugh under his breath. Every interaction felt intimate in a way professional relationships should never feel, and Ethan never once pulled away. During one break, I walked toward the coffee station and stopped when I heard two women from Ethan's department talking nearby. "She's not even trying to hide it anymore," one woman whispered. The other laughed softly. Honestly, bringing his girlfriend here while flirting with him all weekend is brutal. I froze behind the wall beside the coffee counter. "Wait," the first woman said. "Lillian is actually his girlfriend? I thought they were neighbors." The second woman scoffed. "No, they live together. He's pretending they barely know each other." My chest tightened so hard, it physically hurt. "Why would he do that?" the first woman asked. "Because Miranda told everyone she's basically separated from her husband," the other replied. "She can't openly flirt with Ethan if people know he has a girlfriend too." Then came the sentence that shattered whatever denial I still had left. "Everyone knows something's happening between them." Everyone. Everyone except me. I stayed hidden for another few seconds, listening to my own heartbeat pound in my ears. Suddenly, every strange interaction from the past few months replayed differently in my head. The late work nights, the secretive texting, Ethan becoming protective over his phone, the way he smiled at messages when he thought I wasn't looking. I had explained away every single red flag because I trusted him. By Saturday afternoon, I felt emotionally detached from my own body. Ethan told me he was going hiking with coworkers. Miranda was part of the group. "You should come," he offered casually, but his tone made it obvious he hoped I wouldn't. "I'll stay by the pool," I said quietly. They disappeared for almost 2 hours. When the group finally returned, the other employees headed inside, but Ethan and Miranda stayed behind near the pool, talking privately. I watched from my chair as her hand drifted once again onto his lower back, like it belonged there, like she'd already claimed him. Saturday night was the formal company dinner. Everyone dressed nicer than usual, trying to convince themselves expensive clothes transformed corporate dysfunction into elegance. I sat with the IT department. Ethan sat beside Miranda at the sales table. Throughout dinner, I noticed Miranda's hand repeatedly disappear beneath the tablecloth, while Ethan tried not to smile too obviously. Every time she leaned close to whisper something, he blushed like a teenager. Then came dancing. That part destroyed whatever hope I still carried. They danced together repeatedly. Slow songs, fast songs, didn't matter. Miranda's hands wandered over him openly, while Ethan leaned into her like he forgot anyone else existed. I started taking photos with my phone. Not secret spy pictures. Just ordinary company event photos. People laughing. Coworkers dancing. Tables raising glasses. But inside those completely normal photos sat undeniable truth. Miranda touching him. Ethan smiling at her differently than he smiled at me. Bodies too close. Eyes lingering too long. Sometimes betrayal doesn't require catching someone in bed. Sometimes the truth is already obvious long before the confession arrives. Sunday morning, I woke up alone. Ethan wasn't in bed. I found him downstairs in the lobby cafe, sitting with Miranda at a small corner table. Coffee cups between them. Their chairs angled close together. Talking quietly at 7 in the morning, like they were the only people in the building. The moment Ethan noticed me walking toward them, he subtly moved his chair farther away from hers. Too late. "Morning, Lillian," he said quickly. Miranda smiled calmly over her coffee cup. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. I looked directly at Ethan. "Where were you?" Before he could answer, Miranda stepped in smoothly. "We were discussing the Henderson proposal," she said. "Sales never sleeps." Ethan laughed nervously beside her, but something in his eyes looked guilty. And deep down, I already knew the truth. I just didn't know yet how cruelly he planned to justify it. The drive home felt colder than the mountain air outside the lodge. Rain streaked across the windshield while Ethan sat in the passenger seat, texting constantly. Every few seconds, his phone lit up, and he instinctively tilted the screen away from me. That tiny movement hurt more than I expected. It was automatic for him now. Hiding things had become second nature. For almost 40 minutes, neither of us spoke. I kept replaying the weekend in my head, like scenes from a movie I didn't want to finish watching. Miranda's hand on his back, Ethan introducing me as his neighbor, the whispers from coworkers, the dancing, the early morning coffee. The humiliation kept growing every time I thought about how public it all had been. Finally, I couldn't take the silence anymore. We need to talk about this weekend. Ethan didn't even look up from his phone. What about it? I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. Your boss was all over you the entire trip. You told people I was your neighbor. You disappeared with her multiple times. He sighed dramatically again, like I was exhausting him. Lillian, you're being paranoid. Am I? Yes. I glanced at him briefly before looking back at the road. Because your coworkers don't seem to think I'm paranoid? That got his attention. His eyes shifted toward me immediately. What coworkers? I overheard 2 women from your department talking, I said quietly. They said everyone knows something is going on between you and Miranda. His face changed instantly. Not shocked. Caught. The color drained from his expression for one brief second before irritation replaced it. You were eavesdropping? I almost laughed at the absurdity. That's your concern right now? You don't understand how corporate environments work, he muttered. There it is again, I snapped. That line you keep using every time I ask a simple question. Because it's true. No, I said sharply. The truth is your boss acts like she owns you, and you let her. Ethan stared out the passenger window for several seconds. Rain tapped softly against the glass, while tension filled the car so heavily I could barely breathe. Then finally, without looking at me, he said it. Miranda and I have been seeing each other. Everything inside me went numb. Not explosive anger. Not screaming. Just a strange emptiness spreading slowly through my chest. I swallowed hard. Seeing each other. It's complicated. How long? He hesitated. A few months. A few months. I repeated the words silently in my head, while memories crashed together violently. Birthdays, dinner dates, lazy Sundays together on the couch. Him kissing my forehead before work, while apparently sleeping with someone else behind my back. A few months, I repeated aloud finally, while living with me. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I laughed quietly, but there was no humor in it. How exactly was it supposed to happen? He rubbed his face with both hands. You're making this uglier than it is. That sentence almost made me slam on the brakes. Uglier than it is? I repeated slowly. Lillian, Miranda and I work very closely together. These relationships happen in sales all the time. Relationships? I asked. You mean affairs? He finally looked at me then, frustration flashing across his face. You're twisting this. No, Ethan, I'm naming it correctly. He leaned back in his seat and exhaled sharply, like he was preparing to explain something obvious to a child. Miranda has influence in the company. She mentors executives. She opens doors for people. I stared at him in disbelief. You cheated on me for networking opportunities? It's not just networking. Then what is it? His next sentence permanently changed the way I saw him. It's professional development. I actually felt my stomach turn. Professional development. That was how he described betraying me. I shook my head slowly. You cannot seriously hear yourself right now. You work in IT, he said. You don't understand how advancement works in sales. And advancement works by sleeping with your married boss? She's separated. That's not what her wedding ring says. She just hasn't updated things yet. And introducing me as your neighbor? I asked. Was that professional development too? His jaw tightened. We had to manage optics carefully. The calmness in his voice terrified me more than yelling would have. This wasn't guilt. This was justification. Calculated justification. Like, he genuinely believed career ambition excused betrayal. Then he said the sentence that finally broke something inside me. "Lillian, it's just corporate politics. Don't be so insecure." Silence filled the car afterward. Not because I didn't have a response, because suddenly I understood there was nothing left worth saving. I looked at the wet highway stretching ahead of us and felt an eerie calm settle over me. He really believed this. He truly thought I should accept humiliation because it benefited his career. Slowly, I nodded once. "You're right." Ethan visibly relaxed. "Thank you," he said. "I knew eventually you'd understand." I almost pitied him for how badly he misread me. "You're absolutely right," I continued softly. "I shouldn't feel insecure about my boyfriend cheating on me with his boss. It's not cheating. And I definitely shouldn't feel upset about being introduced as your neighbor while everyone in the office laughed behind my back. Lillian, you've really helped me see things clearly." He smiled slightly then. That smile disappeared when I calmly added, "That's why I'm moving out tonight." His head snapped toward me. "What?" "I'm removing myself from the situation," I said. "Don't be dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic. I'm being practical." The rest of the drive passed in tense silence. The moment we got home, I walked straight into our bedroom and pulled out a suitcase. Ethan followed behind me immediately. "This is ridiculous." I ignored him and started folding clothes. "Lillian, seriously." Still, I said nothing. That seemed to unsettle him more than if I'd screamed. "This doesn't change what we have," he insisted. I zipped a bag halfway before finally looking at him. "What exactly do we have?" He opened his mouth but didn't answer immediately. That hesitation told me everything. "You're still the same person to me," he said finally. "No," I replied quietly. "I'm not." He frowned. "Yes, you are. The woman you loved would never have hidden you publicly while flirting with someone else right in front of your face. You're blowing things out of proportion." "Am I?" I asked softly. "Because your coworkers already treat this like common knowledge." He paced anxiously now while I packed chargers, jeans, sweaters, toiletries. Every movement felt strangely detached, like I was watching someone else dismantle my life. But underneath the numbness, anger slowly burned hotter. Not loud anger. Cold anger. The kind that arrives after humiliation settles into clarity. While packing, I opened my phone and scrolled through the retreat photos again. None of them were explicit. That was the shocking part. They didn't need to be. Anyone looking at those pictures could immediately understand what was happening. Miranda's hands on him. The way Ethan leaned toward her. Their body language screaming intimacy. And suddenly, one thought entered my mind so clearly, it almost startled me. If this was truly just corporate politics, then the people closest to them should see it too. I sat down on the edge of the bed and opened the company directory. Miranda Hayes. Emergency contact. Daniel Hayes. Husband. My chest tightened briefly. I wondered if he had any idea. Then I searched his name online and found his social media account. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for several seconds. Part of me knew sending those photos would change lives permanently. Another part of me remembered standing alone in that lodge while everyone silently pitied me. I attached several retreat pictures and typed carefully. "Hello, Daniel. My name is Lillian Brooks. I work with your wife, Miranda Hayes. I attended our company retreat this weekend with my boyfriend, Ethan Carter. I believe you deserve to know that Miranda and Ethan were behaving intimately throughout the event in a very public way. I'm sorry to bring this to you like this, but I thought you should see the truth for yourself." Then I hit send. My heart pounded hard afterward, but I didn't stop there. I searched for Ethan's father next. Robert Carter. Ethan talked about him constantly. A strict man, traditional values, big on loyalty and personal integrity. I found his profile within minutes. This message took longer to write, mostly because my hands started shaking halfway through. "Mr. Carter, my name is Lillian Brooks. Ethan and I have been together for 2 years and living together until tonight. I attended his company retreat this weekend and discovered he has been involved with his boss, Miranda Hayes. I thought you deserved to know why our relationship ended. I'm attaching several photos from the retreat." Send. The room suddenly felt incredibly quiet afterward. Ethan noticed the look on my face immediately. "What did you just do?" I met his eyes calmly. "I stopped protecting you." His expression darkened instantly. "Lillian, you said this was normal," I interrupted. "Corporate politics, right? You had no right to involve other people." I stood slowly. "No," I said quietly. "You involved them the second you started an affair with a married woman." His face turned pale. "You sent those photos to her husband? And your father?" For a moment, genuine panic flashed across his face for the first time all weekend. This could destroy everything. I picked up my suitcase. "No," I corrected softly. "The affair destroyed everything. I just documented it." About an hour after I left the apartment, my phone rang. "Ethan." The second I answered, his voice exploded through the speaker. "What the hell were you thinking?" I stayed calm. "You told me not to be insecure." "This isn't funny, Lillian. Miranda is freaking out right now." "Why?" "You know why." I leaned back in my friend Vanessa's guest room and stared at the ceiling. "If your relationship was so professional, why panic over photos from a public company event?" He went silent briefly. Then he lowered his voice. "HR could get involved. Then maybe managers shouldn't sleep with employees. You could get yourself in trouble too." "For what?" I asked. "Taking pictures at a public retreat?" "You sent them to family members." "Yes," I replied calmly. "The people being lied to deserved honesty too. This could ruin careers." I closed my eyes for a moment. "You should have thought about that before turning cheating into a leadership strategy." Then I hung up. And for the first time all weekend, Ethan had absolutely no control over the conversation anymore. I stayed with my friend Vanessa for the next 3 weeks. She lived across town in a small apartment above a bakery, and every morning the smell of fresh bread drifted through the windows before sunrise. It should have felt comforting. Instead, most mornings I woke up confused for a few seconds, forgetting my relationship had ended, before reality hit me all over again. That was the strange thing about heartbreak. The pain didn't stay constant. It came in waves. Sometimes I felt furious, sometimes embarrassed, sometimes relieved. And sometimes I just sat staring at my phone, wondering how a man I trusted for 2 years became someone I barely recognized in a single weekend. Vanessa tried not to push me too hard. One night, while we were eating takeout on her couch, she finally asked quietly, "Do you think he actually loved you?" I stared at the television without really seeing it. "I think he loved what I gave him," I answered eventually. "Stability, loyalty, a safe person waiting at home while he chased something else." Vanessa frowned. "That's not love." "I know." And deep down, I think I had known for longer than I wanted to admit. Once the shock faded, memories started rearranging themselves differently in my mind. Tiny moments I ignored before suddenly looked obvious now. Ethan becoming protective of his phone. Sudden late-night client dinners. The way he occasionally compared my career to his in subtle little comments that sounded harmless at the time. "You're lucky IT is less political. You don't understand how ambitious departments operate. I need people above me to notice me." At the time, I thought he was just stressed and career-focused. Now I realized he had been preparing excuses long before I discovered the affair. Work became unbearably awkward almost immediately. By Monday morning, everyone knew something had happened. No one said it directly, of course. Offices survive on polite silence. But conversations stopped when I entered break rooms. People suddenly became fascinated with their computer screens when I walked by. Miranda completely avoided me. Not even eye contact. The woman who once carried herself like she owned every room suddenly looked tense and distracted whenever she passed through the hallway. Ethan looked worse. The confidence that once made him attractive had disappeared almost overnight. He looked exhausted now, nervous, like someone waiting for bad news every minute of the day. Which, honestly, he probably was. 3 days after the retreat, rumors exploded across the office. HR had officially opened an investigation into Miranda and Ethan's relationship. Apparently, several employees had already complained privately about favoritism long before my photos ever surfaced. The retreat pictures simply forced leadership to stop ignoring what everyone already suspected. Company policies strictly prohibited managers from having undisclosed relationships with direct employees, especially relationships affecting promotions and account assignments. Miranda had spent years building a powerful reputation inside the company. Now people whispered every time she walked past. I should have felt satisfied. Instead, mostly I felt tired. One afternoon, while fixing a printer issue on the 4th floor, I overheard two executives talking quietly near a conference room. "Daniel filed for divorce," one whispered. "After 20 years? She humiliated him." I kept walking before they noticed me listening. That night, I sat alone in Vanessa's guest room, replaying those words in my head. 20 years. Miranda hadn't just betrayed a husband. She detonated an entire family for an affair with a younger employee who called cheating professional development. And somehow that realization made everything feel uglier. A few days later, another rumor spread. Ethan's father had driven down personally to confront him. Apparently, the argument was loud enough that neighbors heard screaming through the apartment walls. Part of me imagined Ethan trying to explain himself the same way he explained things to me.
Corporate politics.
Networking.
Career advancement.
I wondered if those excuses sounded as pathetic to his father as they eventually sounded to me. About 2 weeks after I moved out, Ethan finally texted me. "Can we please talk?" I stared at the message for a long time. Then another appeared. "I know I hurt you, but things got out of control." Out of control. Like the affair had happened accidentally. Like he had simply tripped and fallen into another relationship for several months. 5 minutes later, another message came. Miranda told me she's probably getting fired. I read that one twice. Not because I cared. Because even now, his focus remained centered on consequences instead of betrayal. Not "I destroyed us." Not "I lied to you." Not "I humiliated you publicly." Just panic over careers collapsing. I locked my phone without replying. That silence became my final answer. The following weekend, I signed a lease for a new apartment downtown. Smaller place. Cleaner. Mine. While unpacking dishes alone in my new kitchen, I suddenly started crying without warning. Not dramatic sobbing. Just quiet tears sliding down my face while holding a coffee mug Ethan and I bought together last Christmas. Because healing isn't linear. You can know leaving was the right decision, and still mourn the future you thought you were building. I ended up throwing the mug away. Not out of anger. Out of necessity. Some things stop belonging in your life once the illusion attached to them disappears. By the 3rd week, office gossip reached peak chaos. Miranda had apparently been placed on administrative leave while HR finished investigating. Ethan requested a department transfer. People whispered constantly about inappropriate promotions, special treatment, and private meetings that suddenly looked suspicious in hindsight. One coworker from accounting approached me quietly near the elevators one afternoon. "For what it's worth," she said softly, "a lot of us are glad you exposed it." I looked at her carefully. "Why?" She hesitated. "Because everyone knew something was wrong, but nobody wanted to be the person who said it out loud." That sentence stayed with me the entire drive home. Nobody wanted to say it out loud. That's how toxic situations survive. People see uncomfortable truths and remain silent because silence feels safer. And eventually, the person being betrayed starts questioning their own instincts instead of questioning the people lying to them. That was exactly what Ethan tried to do to me. Convince me my pain was insecurity. Convince me humiliation was professionalism. Convince me betrayal was ambition. The scariest part? For a little while, I almost believed him. One night near the end of those 3 weeks, I sat alone on my apartment floor surrounded by unopened boxes while rain hit the windows outside. I thought about the exact moment everything changed. Not the affair itself. Not the photos. Not even the confession. It was that sentence in the car. "Don't be so insecure." Because people say that when they want your silence more than your trust. Healthy love reassures. Manipulation minimizes. I finally understood that. Looking back now, I don't regret leaving quietly. I don't regret documenting what happened. And honestly, I don't regret sending the photos either. The truth already existed. I simply stopped carrying the burden of protecting it for them. Ethan wanted the safety of a loyal girlfriend at home while publicly acting single around his boss. Miranda wanted the thrill of power and secrecy without consequences reaching her real life. Both of them depended on silence. The moment the truth left the conference room and entered real life, everything collapsed. Sometimes people call that revenge. I call it accountability. Here's what I learned from all of this. If someone hides you to protect their image, they are not protecting your relationship. They are protecting themselves. If your partner constantly tells you you're overreacting instead of addressing your pain, pay attention to that. And if someone betrays you while calmly explaining why you should tolerate it, believe them the first time they show you who they are. Ethan taught me something important without meaning to. Closure does not always come from conversations. Sometimes, closure comes from seeing someone clearly for the very first time. I used to think love meant fighting harder for relationships. Now I think love also means recognizing when respect has already died. And once respect dies, no amount of explanations, office politics, or carefully rehearsed excuses can bring it back. So tell me honestly, if the person you loved introduced you as a neighbor while secretly dating someone else in front of an entire company retreat, would you have stayed silent? Or would you have stopped protecting their lies too? My name is Ophelia Graves. I am in my 50s now, and I built a financial consulting firm from nothing after my divorce. I built it the way I built my whole life after everything fell apart, quietly, carefully, without asking anyone to feel sorry for me. My daughter Belle was 7 when her father remarried. By the time Belle was 10, she had started calling his new wife Mom. And me? I became Ophelia. Not Mom, not Mama, not even something soft. Just Ophelia. Sometimes, when she wanted something, she called me Ophi, like I was an old family friend who happened to share her blood. It sounds small when you say it out loud. A name, a shift, a child adjusting to a blended family. But that was the first time I felt like a guest in my own daughter's life. Still, I showed up. Birthdays, school plays, parent meetings, graduation photos where I stood at the edge so her father and Claudia could stand in the center. Every time there was a bill, I paid it. Every time there was a problem, I solved it. Every time Belle needed help, I gave it before she even had to ask. I told myself that was motherhood. I also told myself it did not hurt when my daughter looked through me like furniture. That Christmas, I was invited by email. Not a phone call, not a warm message. Dinner at 4 p.m., Dad's house. That was all. Just logistics. I went anyway. I wore the dark wool coat Belle used to love when she was little. She used to say it made me look like a woman in an old detective movie. She would tug on the sleeve and giggle like I was the safest person in the world. When I walked into the house that Christmas afternoon, she barely looked up. The house smelled like cinnamon, roasted nuts, pine branches, and expensive candles. The kind of smell people use when they want a home to feel warm. But the air itself felt sharp, like everyone had already chosen their roles before I arrived. Belle stood in the living room holding a small black box. People gathered around her like she was about to make an announcement. Her father was there, smiling proudly. Claudia was beside him, polished and glowing, the kind of woman who always looked as if life had never wrinkled her dress. Belle's friends were there too. A few relatives from her father's side. Even Claudia's niece, a girl I barely knew, stood near the fireplace recording on her phone. I got a quick nod from Belle's father. That was it. No one offered me a drink. No one asked how I was. I stood near the edge of the room, holding the coffee mug I had brought from home, a habit I developed after years of never knowing whether I would be treated as family or furniture in that house. Belle lifted the black box and turned to Claudia. Claudia, she said, her voice bright and confident, you've always been the woman who showed up for me. You loved me like your own when you didn't have to. So I wanted to give you something that shows how much I appreciate you. She placed the box into Claudia's hands like it was sacred. Claudia opened it. Inside was a set of sleek silver keys. The room exploded. Someone gasped. Someone clapped. Belle's friends squealed like they had just witnessed a proposal. Claudia stared down at the keys, then looked up with tears in her eyes. Belle said it clearly, loudly, making sure every person heard. "It's yours, the Audi RS5 we test drove last month. I bought it yesterday. Merry Christmas, Mom." Mom. The word landed in my chest before the applause did. Claudia covered her mouth. Belle hugged her. Her father wiped his eyes like he was watching the most beautiful moment of his life. I sat frozen, with my hands resting on my knees. It was not about the money. I could have bought that car 10 times over and still slept fine. It was about what the gift meant. It meant my daughter wanted everyone in that room to see who mattered to her, who she admired, who she believed had earned the title. And it was not me. Then Belle turned toward me. Not with warmth. With timing. Like she had remembered the second act of a performance. "I didn't forget about you," she said. She tossed a small package across the coffee table. It landed near my hands. The room went quiet, in that hungry way people do when they know something is coming and they want to see how far it will go. I opened it slowly. Inside was a pale blue handkerchief, neatly folded. The stitching was dark navy, careful, almost beautiful. Then I read the words. "Worst mom ever." The room laughed. Not everyone. But enough. Belle's friends cackled like it was brilliant. Claudia gave me a pitying smile that made my stomach turn. Belle's father looked away, but he did not correct her. He did not tell her to stop. He did not say my name. Belle stood there with her arms crossed, satisfied. I folded the handkerchief once. Then again. Then I slid it into my coat pocket. "That's clever," I said, because I did not trust my voice with anything else. Belle shrugged. "It's just a joke. Lighten up." That is the moment you learn something important about disrespect. It always arrives with instructions. Do not react. Do not ruin the mood. Do not make everyone uncomfortable by admitting they already made you bleed. I did not say another word for the rest of the night. I watched Belle pour wine for Claudia. I watched her cut slices of pie for everyone else. I watched her laugh with her friends while I sat in the same room, feeling less like a mother and more like an old receipt someone forgot to throw away. I used to think being ignored was the worst thing. That night, I realized I was not being ignored. I was being erased. When I drove home, I did not turn on music. I did not turn on the heat. I needed the cold. I needed something honest against my skin, because my mind kept trying to soften what had happened. She did not mean it. She was showing off. It was just a joke. But then I thought about the house Belle lived in, the car she drove, the internship she bragged about getting through networking. She believed those things came from her father and Claudia. They did not. They came from me.
Quietly. Carefully.
Invisible by design. I wanted Belle to feel capable. I wanted her to believe she had earned her stability. I did not want her to feel like I was buying her love. But looking back, I can admit the truth. I was buying my place in her life. I was just doing it silently. When I got home, I took the handkerchief out of my pocket and placed it on the entryway table. Worst mom ever. I stared at it for a long time. Then I said softly, "Not anymore." Not anymore meant I was finished begging for scraps of affection. Not anymore meant I would no longer fund a life where I was treated like an embarrassment. Not anymore meant Belle was about to learn the difference between love and access. I went to bed that night, but I did not sleep. By morning, I had made my decision. The next morning, I made the calls calmly. That is the part people never understand when they hear this story later. They imagine rage, screaming, revenge, some dramatic breakdown where I smashed glasses and made reckless choices out of humiliation. But I was calm. Too calm. Because the truth is, the handkerchief was not the wound. It was proof of the wound. Years of being tolerated instead of loved had simply reached a moment where pretending became impossible. I sat in my office with the city still dark outside the windows and opened the folder I had kept hidden for years. Trust documents. Property agreements.
Corporate approvals.
quiet little systems of protection built around my daughter's life. Belle lived in a townhouse under her name, but legally it belonged to a private trust I controlled. I created it after she struggled financially during her first year out of college. She thought her father and Claudia had stepped in to help her. They let her believe that. Especially Claudia. Claudia loved looking generous when someone else was paying the bill. The white Mercedes Belle drove was the same story. The payments came through one of my holding companies. Insurance, maintenance, tracking systems, registration renewals. I handled everything so smoothly Belle never questioned it. I used to think invisible love was noble. Now, it just felt pathetic. I called my estate lawyer first. Marcus Reed. Steady voice. Expensive suits. The kind of man who never sounded surprised by anything. "Ophelia," he said. "Didn't expect to hear from you during Christmas week." "Plans changed," I replied. Then I explained everything. Not emotionally. Just facts. Belle's internship at my consulting firm had been arranged through a partner program. She thought she earned it through networking events and recommendations from Claudia's contacts. In reality, I created the opening myself. I instructed Marcus to revoke it immediately. Then I told him to remove her building access approval and mark her file as ineligible for placement consideration. Clean paperwork. Professional language. No drama. Marcus paused. "You're certain?" I looked at the framed photo sitting on my desk. Belle at 6 years old, frosting on her nose, sitting in my lap after we ruined a birthday cake together because she insisted on helping me decorate it. Back then, she used to stare at me like I hung the moon. "She humiliated me on purpose," I said quietly. Marcus exhaled. "All right." Then the house. I instructed him to terminate the occupancy clause in the trust agreement. Belle would have 30 days to vacate, unless she qualified independently under a new lease structure. For the first time in her adult life, she would have to prove she could support herself without invisible hands holding her upright. Then the car. A remote disable request through the insurance security system. Again, legal, documented, simple. Marcus hesitated one last time. "This may permanently damage your relationship with her." I stared at the handkerchief lying folded beside my keyboard. "No," I said. The damage was already there. After the calls, the days moved strangely slowly. Coffee in the morning. Work during the afternoon. Silence at night. Part of me kept waiting for Belle to call before consequences reached her. Not to ask for money. Not to ask for help. Just to apologize. To say she crossed a line. To say she saw me. But 7 days passed without a word. No Merry Christmas. No, hope you got home safe. Nothing. The silence hurt more than I expected, because it confirmed something ugly. Belle genuinely believed I would absorb humiliation forever. On the 7th day, my phone rang.
Unknown number.
I almost ignored it. Something stopped me. I answered without speaking. "Mom?" Belle's voice cracked immediately. Real crying. Not dramatic crying. Not performative tears for social media or sympathy. The kind that steals air from your lungs. "It's me," she whispered. "Please don't do this." I stayed silent. She kept talking, because silence is unbearable when guilt finally arrives. "I went to check in at the company today," she said shakily. "They said my internship offer was revoked. My access badge doesn't work anymore." A sharp inhale. "And when I got home, the code was changed." Her voice dropped lower. "The car won't start either." Then finally, quietly, "I know it was you." I closed my eyes. Not because I regretted it. Because hearing her afraid still hurt me. "Just talk to me," she pleaded. "Please, tell me what I need to do to fix this." There it was. The word I used to ache for. Mom. Not at Christmas. Not when she mocked me in front of strangers. Only now, when comfort disappeared. "What about Claudia?" I asked evenly. Belle hesitated. The silence told me everything before she spoke. "She said it wasn't her responsibility," Belle admitted weakly. "She said I'm old enough to handle my own problems." I leaned back slowly in my chair. No satisfaction came from hearing it. Only confirmation. I told you, I said quietly. That woman shows up when there's applause. Belle cried harder. I know, she whispered. I know I messed up. I was trying to be funny. I didn't think it would. You never think, I snapped before I could stop myself. The sharpness in my voice shocked even me. You never stop to ask how much I've done for you. And now, suddenly, I'm mom again because your life feels uncomfortable? She sobbed openly now. It twisted something painful deep inside my chest, but I forced myself not to soften. Because softness was how we got here. Please, she whispered. I need you. I looked at the folded handkerchief still sitting on my entry table across the room. Worst mom ever. My throat tightened. I needed you too, I said quietly. Then I ended the call. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake, hearing two sounds layered together in my head. Belle laughing at Christmas. Belle crying on the phone. The problem was not the money. It was not even the insult itself. It was what the insult revealed. You are only valuable when useful. The next morning, Belle called again. This time, from her real number. Mom, she said quickly, like she was afraid I would hang up. Can we please talk in person? I'll come to you. I let silence stretch. Finally, she spoke again. I'm sorry, she whispered. I swear I didn't realize how cruel it looked.
Cruel.
Interesting word. Not wrong. I've been sleeping on my friend Lacey's couch, she continued. Dad keeps saying he doesn't want to get involved. Claudia texted once asking if I was okay, but that's it. There was another pause. And I know you're the only one who can unlock the car. I closed my eyes again. Even now, survival sat at the center of the conversation. You know, I said slowly, I spent years hoping you would call me Mom again. Belle inhaled shakily. I do want to, she rushed out. I didn't know how anymore. Then softer. Dad said a lot about you growing up. There it was. The old poison, finally stepping into the light. He made you sound cold, Belle admitted. Like all you cared about was work and control. Claudia felt easier, safer. Convenient, I corrected. I know how it sounds, she whispered quickly. But this isn't just about the stuff now. I miss you. For one dangerous second, I saw my little girl again. The child who used to climb into my lap after nightmares. The little blonde-haired 6-year-old who once cried because she thought I looked lonely eating dinner alone after the divorce. Nostalgia can destroy boundaries faster than anger ever will. So I kept my voice steady. I'm not stopping you from fixing things, I said. You're just going to do it without my safety net. Silence. Then, what does that mean? It means you're going to find work on your own. Rent a place on your own. Learn how life feels when someone isn't constantly cushioning every fall. Her breathing changed. So this is punishment. No, I replied. This is a boundary. She sounded angry for a moment, then terrified again. I don't have anyone else, she whispered. Maybe you should ask yourself why. She did not argue. She just went quiet. Then, bitterly, thanks for nothing. The call ended. I sat at my kitchen counter, holding cold coffee, long after the line disconnected. Every instinct in me wanted to rescue her. That is the curse of motherhood. Even when your child cuts you deeply, part of you still reaches toward them automatically. But I also knew the truth. If I saved Belle again, nothing would change. The next holiday, I would still be Ophelia. Still tolerated. Still useful. Still invisible. Later that evening, my friend Daniel stopped by unexpectedly. Retired police detective. Blunt. Observant. One of the few people who knew how lonely my relationship with Belle had become over the years. He took one look at my face and frowned. You okay? I nodded weakly. He sat across from me quietly for a moment before speaking again. Tough love? I stared at the handkerchief on the table. No, I said softly. Just love, without lies. Daniel nodded slowly. Sometimes being the good parent means surviving being the villain in someone else's story. By the next morning, the rest of the family had started calling. The first call came from my ex-husband. Elliot always sounded the same when he was angry. Controlled at first, like he believed calmness automatically made him right. "What the hell did you do to Belle?" he demanded the second I answered. No greeting. No hesitation. Just accusation. I stood in my kitchen, watching rain slide down the windows. "She told you already," I replied. "She can't get into her own house," he snapped. "Her car's disabled. Her internship disappeared overnight. Are you seriously doing this because of some stupid joke?" I laughed once. Not because it was funny, because I suddenly realized how easy it had always been for everyone to reduce my pain into something small. A joke.
Sensitivity. Overreaction.
Meanwhile, years of disrespect were somehow invisible. "It isn't her house," I said calmly. "Legally, the property belongs to a trust under my control. The car is under one of my companies. The internship was through my firm."
Silence.
Then Elliot spoke again, slower this time. "You never told her that. You never corrected her assumptions either," I answered. That hit something. I could hear it in the pause that followed. "You're humiliating your own daughter," he said finally. "No," I replied quietly. "She humiliated me for years. I just stopped funding it." Elliot sighed sharply, like he was exhausted by me. The same sigh he used during our marriage whenever my feelings became inconvenient. "You always did this," he muttered. "You throw money at everything and expect people to love you for it." The old accusation. The familiar wound. Except this time, I did not shrink under it. "And you poisoned her against me every chance you got," I said evenly. "So don't pretend this happened in a vacuum." He went silent. For a moment, I imagined him standing in that expensive kitchen beside Claudia, trying to decide whether defending Belle mattered more than facing the truth. Finally, he spoke again. "She's struggling." "So did I replied. Then I hung up. The social media post started 2 days later. Not directly naming me. That would have made Belle look cruel. Instead, they came wrapped in soft music and vague captions. "Some people only love you when they control you." Healing from narcissistic parents is painful. Learning who really cares about you changes everything. Her friends reposted them with crying emojis and comments about toxic motherhood. People who had never met me suddenly became experts on my character. At first, I ignored it. Then my niece Tasha called. "You seen TikTok today?" she asked immediately. "No." "Good. Stay off it." That alone told me enough. An hour later, Tasha arrived at my house carrying iced coffee and the expression of someone preparing to deliver bad news carefully. "She posted a video crying," Tasha said, dropping onto my couch. "Sad piano music, close-up tears, whole thing." I rubbed my temples. "She say my name?" "No, but everyone knows." I nodded once. That part did not surprise me. What surprised me was how tired I felt. Not angry. Not defensive. Just exhausted. Tasha took a sip of coffee before continuing. "But it's turning around." I looked up. "What do you mean?" "People started stitching old videos together," she explained. "There are clips of Belle bragging about having a free car, a paid-off house, luxury vacations, and 2 moms who spoil her." I stayed quiet. Tasha leaned back against the couch. "People are asking why the abusive mother apparently financed half her life." I closed my eyes briefly. Even then, I felt no satisfaction. Just sadness. Because public humiliation had become a language Belle understood, better than private honesty. "You didn't ruin her life," Tasha said firmly. "You just stopped paying for the illusion." That line stayed with me longer than I expected. The illusion. Not just Belle's illusion. Mine too. I had spent years pretending invisible sacrifice would somehow become visible love eventually. That weekend, my brother Nathan hosted a family dinner. I almost skipped it. But hiding would have looked like guilt, and for the first time in years, I did not feel guilty for having limits. The moment I walked in, I felt the attention shift toward me. Conversation softened. People glanced up too quickly. I had become the headline. Nathan hugged me tightly at the door. "You okay?" "I'm functioning." "That's something." Dinner moved awkwardly at first. Too much careful politeness. Too many sideways glances. Finally, my cousin Diane spoke what everyone else wanted to ask. "So what's the real story?" she asked cautiously. "People are talking." I set my wine glass down carefully. Then I told them. Not dramatically. Just plainly. "She gave Claudia a $20,000 car for Christmas," I said, then handed me a handkerchief embroidered with "Worst Mom Ever" in front of a room full of people. The table went silent. Even the silverware stopped moving. Nathan stared at me. "She actually did that?" I nodded once. And everyone laughed. Diane looked horrified. Another cousin muttered, "Jesus." So I turned off the faucet. I finished quietly. "If she hates me that much, she can live without the things I provided." Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Nathan leaned back slowly. "About time," he said. Not everyone agreed. I could see discomfort in certain faces, judgment in others. But for the first time in years, I did not feel insane for reaching my limit. I felt seen. After dinner, Nathan walked me to my car. "You know," he said quietly, "Belle always loved you." I laughed softly. "No, she loved what I prevented." Nathan frowned slightly. "That's not fair." "Maybe not," I admitted, "but it's true." The next week, the gossip reached my office. My assistant knocked carefully on my door one morning. "There's some online discussion involving your daughter," she said gently. HR flagged it because a few employees shared the videos. Professional embarrassment never bothered me much. But personal humiliation spreading into my company? That exhausted me in a way I could barely explain. "I'll handle it," I said. I sent one calm internal memo. Professional boundaries, social media conduct, personal matters staying outside workplace discussions. I never mentioned Belle by name. I did not need to. Everyone already knew. Then Saturday came, and I ran into Claudia at the grocery store. For a second, I almost didn't recognize her. Without makeup and perfect lighting, she looked older, sharper around the edges. Tired. The moment she saw me, she straightened instinctively, like she was preparing for an audience. "Ophelia," she said coolly. "Claudia?" She crossed her arms. "You really made a mess out of things." I looked down at the basket in her hands. Expensive wine. Imported cheese. Gourmet chocolates. Interesting. "She's staying with friends now," Claudia continued. "She's struggling." "And where is she staying tonight?" I asked calmly. Claudia's jaw tightened. "That's not my responsibility." There it was. Simple. Clean. Honest. I almost thanked her for finally saying it out loud. "You let her call you Mom," I said quietly. Claudia rolled her eyes. "She chose that. And you encouraged it. She needed stability after the divorce." "No," I corrected softly. "She needed applause. And so did you." That hit harder than I expected. Claudia's expression cracked briefly, before hardening again. "You're bitter." I shook my head slowly. "No, I'm finished." Then I picked up my groceries and walked away. Halfway to the parking lot, I realized something strange. For years, Claudia intimidated me. Not because she was cruel. Because Belle loved her more openly than she ever loved me. But standing there in that grocery store, I finally saw her clearly. Claudia liked being adored. She liked looking maternal. She liked winning. But responsibility? Sacrifice? Sleeping awake at night, worrying about Belle's future? That had always been mine. 3 days later, Belle left me a voicemail. Not a call. A voicemail. Her voice sounded tired. "I saw the posts getting bigger," she said quietly. "I didn't mean for people at your work to get involved." There was a long pause. I just felt alone. Another pause. "I'm sorry if I crossed a line." Not a full apology. Not yet. But it was the first time her words sounded less like performance and more like confusion. Then, a week later, the letter arrived. Plain envelope. No return address. The second I saw the handwriting, my chest tightened. I did not open it immediately. I left it sitting on my kitchen counter for 3 days because part of me feared what it would do to me. Not anger. Hope. Hope was far more dangerous. Finally, late one night, I opened it. The letter was short. No dramatic excuses. No manipulation. Belle wrote that silence felt worse than my anger. She admitted she had spent years believing Elliot's version of me because it was easier than confronting her own guilt. She wrote that Claudia felt simpler because Claudia carried no history, no divorce, no childhood confusion, no complicated wounds. Then I reached the line that made my throat tighten. I made you the safe villain because I thought you would love me no matter how cruel I became. I read that sentence 3 times. Because it was true. Painfully true. She ended the letter with 6 words. I think I finally see you. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside a drawer filled with old birthday cards and childhood photos. Not because everything was fixed. Because for the first time in years, Belle's words did not feel rehearsed. They felt honest. After I read Belle's letter, the house felt quieter than usual. Not empty. Different. Like something sharp inside me had finally stopped twisting. For years, every interaction with my daughter carried tension underneath it. Hope mixed with humiliation. Love tangled together with disappointment so tightly, I could no longer separate one from the other. But that letter changed something. Not because it repaired everything, because it told the truth. And truth, even painful truth, is easier to live with than pretending. A few days later, I found myself driving across town toward the address written in tiny letters at the bottom of the envelope. Belle's new apartment sat above a small coffee shop near the older part of the city. Weathered brick, narrow stairs, hand-painted apartment numbers slightly crooked on the doors. Nothing luxurious. Nothing curated for social media. I parked across the street and stayed inside the car for several minutes. Part of me wondered if I should leave. Another part wanted to run upstairs and pull my daughter into my arms the way I used to after nightmares. But rescuing her had always been easier than respecting myself. So I stayed where I was. Around noon, Belle finally appeared. For a second, I barely recognized her. She looked thinner than before. Her expensive salon hair had been tied back carelessly. No designer coat, no perfect makeup, no polished image carefully built for cameras and approval. But she also looked steadier somehow. Tired, yet real. She carried a messenger bag over one shoulder and held a paper coffee cup in both hands, like she was trying to stay warm. When she reached the sidewalk, she paused to lock the apartment carefully before heading downstairs toward the cafe below. Her shoulders were straight. Her eyes looked forward. Not lost. Not destroyed. Standing. Something inside my chest loosened painfully at the sight. Because this was all I had ever wanted. Not obedience. Not worship. Just for her to become someone capable of standing without treating me like the floor beneath her feet. Belle disappeared inside the coffee shop without ever noticing my car across the street. I could have gone in. I could have walked over, said her name, let us both cry in public like some emotional movie scene where everything finally heals. But real life rarely works that way. Some wounds need distance before they can close properly. So instead, I stepped out quietly, crossed the street, and approached the mailbox beside the building entrance. Inside the envelope I carried was a single handwritten note. Proud of you for standing. Keep going. Nothing else. No check. No offer. No rescue. Just acknowledgement. Then I left. On the drive home, I expected to feel guilty. Instead, I felt calm. Not happy. Healing and happiness are not always the same thing. That evening, I made dinner for one and turned on the television, mostly to fill the silence. Rain tapped softly against the windows while some old movie played in the background without holding my attention. I kept thinking about Belle walking down those stairs. There had been no arrogance in her face. No performance. Just exhaustion and determination. For the first time in years, I saw the woman she might become if nobody rescued her too quickly. My phone buzzed around 9. A text message. From Belle. I saw your note. That was all at first. Then, another message appeared. I almost cried in the middle of work. Then one more. Thank you for not giving up on me completely. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. I never gave up on you. 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared. Appeared again. Finally. I know that now. I did not answer after that. Not because I wanted to punish her. Because some conversations deserve space instead of urgency. Over the next few weeks, things changed slowly. Belle got a job at a marketing firm downtown. Not glamorous work. Entry level. Long hours. Real responsibility. She rented that tiny apartment officially under her own name after picking up extra freelance work on weekends. Tasha occasionally updated me without making it obvious. She's exhausted, my niece said once while helping herself to my fridge. But she's actually doing it. I nodded quietly. Another time, Tasha smirked and added, she sold half her designer bags online. That almost made me laugh. Almost. Elliot called me once during that period. Not angry this time.
Uncomfortable.
I think she's changing, he admitted quietly. I leaned back in my chair. She's growing up. There was a long silence. Then he sighed. I should have stepped in years ago. Yes, I thought. You should have. But I was too tired to reopen old wars. We both made mistakes, I said instead. It was not forgiveness. Just truth. Even Claudia disappeared from the center of Belle's life eventually. Not dramatically. No screaming fight, no betrayal scene. Just distance. Because once the comfort vanished, the relationship itself had nothing strong enough underneath it to survive reality. That hurt Belle deeply, I think. Not because Claudia stopped loving her completely, but because Belle finally understood the difference between affection and sacrifice. One rainy Sunday afternoon, about 3 months later, Belle knocked on my front door. Not with confidence. With nervousness. When I opened the door, she stood there, holding a small bakery box in both hands. Her eyes immediately filled with tears. Hi, Mom. The word hit harder than I expected. Not because it sounded victorious. Because it sounded sincere. I stepped aside silently and let her inside. She looked around the house slowly, almost carefully, like she was noticing details she had ignored for years. The framed photographs. The bookshelves. The old knitted blanket on the couch she used to sleep under during thunderstorms. I brought lemon cake, she said softly. You used to make it for my birthdays. I nodded once. We sat in the kitchen drinking tea for nearly an hour before either of us mentioned Christmas. Finally, Belle looked down at her hands. I really hurt you. I stayed quiet. Tears slid down her face anyway. I think part of me believed you would always stay, she whispered. No matter how badly I treated you. There it was again. The truth. I folded my hands carefully together. Love without respect becomes survival, I said softly. And I was tired of surviving my own daughter. Belle cried harder at that. Not defensively. Not dramatically. Just honestly. I'm sorry, she whispered. For all of it. I believed her. That was the difference now. Not the words. The weight behind them. We did not magically fix everything that afternoon. Some stories do not end with instant healing. Some relationships rebuild slowly, carefully, like shattered glass being arranged piece by piece. But when Belle left that evening, she hugged me tightly at the front door. Not out of obligation. Not out of fear. And when she whispered, I love you, Mom, I did not hear manipulation anymore. I heard my daughter. Later that night, I opened the drawer in my bedroom and took out the handkerchief again. Worst mom ever. The stitching still looked sharp beneath the light. But it no longer cut me open. Now it felt like evidence. Proof of the moment I finally drew a boundary strong enough to save both of us. Because the truth is, I never wanted to destroy my daughter. I wanted her to grow into someone capable of loving people without using them. And maybe I needed to grow too. To understand that being a good mother does not mean accepting humiliation forever. Sometimes love sounds soft. Sometimes love sounds like sacrifice. And sometimes love sounds like a locked door that finally teaches someone to knock. Here are the lessons I learned from all of this. If someone humiliates you publicly, they have usually been disrespecting you privately for a long time. Providing for someone is an act of love, but it cannot replace respect. A safety net becomes dangerous when it teaches someone they never have to stand on their own. Boundaries feel cruel only to people who benefited from you having none. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is stop rescuing them long enough for them to become themselves. So tell me honestly, what would you have done if your own daughter handed you that handkerchief in front of everyone? Would you have forgiven her immediately? Or would you have done exactly what Ophelia Graves did? My name is Gabriella Hayes. I'm 32 years old. And until my last birthday, I thought the most painful thing someone could do was touch an old wound. I was wrong. The most painful thing is when someone sees the wound, learns the story behind it, promises to protect it, and then uses it as the punchline. My boyfriend, Mason Vale, threw me a birthday party at my apartment. Nothing huge. Close friends. Family. Maybe 15 people. Music low enough that people could still talk. Food spread across my kitchen counter. Paper plates stacked beside a chocolate cake from my favorite bakery. The kind of small, warm evening that should have become a good memory. For a while, I really thought it would. Mason was 29.
Charming.
Loud in that effortless way people forgive because he usually made them laugh. He could walk into a room of strangers and somehow leave with 3 invitations, 2 inside jokes, and someone saying, "I love that guy." That was part of what pulled me toward him in the beginning. I was quieter, more careful. The kind of woman who checks locks twice, keeps receipts, and thinks before speaking when emotions get sharp. Mason was the opposite. He loved surprises, pranks, big reactions. He called it keeping life interesting. Most of the time, I let it go. But 1 week before my birthday, I told him there was one thing I needed him not to do. Cake smashing. I said it clearly. "Mason, please promise me you won't smash my face into the cake." He laughed at first, like I was teasing. Then he saw my expression. I said, "I'm serious." 3 years earlier, I had been in a kitchen fire. It happened fast.
Grease. Flames.
Panic.
The kind of seconds that stretch so long they keep living inside your body years later. I had second-degree burns along my cheek and jaw. The scars healed better than anyone expected, but the skin stayed sensitive. More than that, my mind stayed sensitive. Anything sudden against my face could pull me straight back into that night. The heat, the smell, the terror of not knowing how badly I was hurt. Mason knew all of this. He had seen the scars every day for 8 months. He had kissed the edge of them and told me they didn't change how beautiful I was. So when I asked him not to do it, I thought I was safe. He put both hands up and said, "Okay, babe, I hear you. No cake smashing." I believed him. That was my mistake. The party started beautifully. My mother came early and helped arrange the food. My older sister Marissa brought flowers and kept whispering that Mason had actually done a good job. My friend Alex showed up with wine and made everyone laugh before he even took off his jacket. Mason moved through the room like the perfect host, smiling, refilling drinks, putting his arm around my waist whenever he passed me. Every time he touched me, I relaxed a little more. I remember thinking maybe I had been unfair to worry. Then it was time for cake. Mason brought it out with the candles already lit. Everyone gathered around. Phones came up. The room filled with that soft, happy sound people make before singing. I leaned forward. For 1 second, I felt grateful. Grateful for surviving. Grateful for being loved. Grateful for making it to 32 with people around me. Then Mason placed his hand on the back of my head and shoved my face straight into the cake. Not a playful tap. Not frosting on my nose.
Full force.
My face hit chocolate, cream, and candle smoke. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The room went silent. Dead silent. No laughter. No cheering. Just the thick, horrible quiet of people realizing something cruel had happened in front of them. I straightened slowly. Frosting was in my hair. Cake was on my cheeks. Chocolate was up my nose. My skin burned where the scar tissue met the frosting. But worse than that was Mason laughing. He clapped once, delighted with himself. "Oh my God," he said. "That was perfect. Did you see her face?" Nobody answered. My mother looked horrified. Marissa's chair scraped like she was about to stand. Alex muttered, "What the hell, man?" And Mason still smiled. That was when something inside me went cold. Because the prank hurt. But his joy hurt more. I grabbed paper towels from the counter and started wiping my face. Everyone watched me like they were waiting to see whether I would scream, cry, or pretend it was funny. I did none of those things. I put the towels down. I walked to the door. And I left my own birthday party. Mason followed me into the hallway. "Gabriella, come on," he said. "It was just a joke." I turned around. He wasn't sorry. Not really. He looked irritated.
Embarrassed.
Like my reaction had ruined his moment. "You promised me," I said. He sighed. "You're being way too sensitive." I stared at him. "You knew why I asked." He rolled his eyes. "God, Gabriella, it's cake. Stop being such a baby about it." And that was the moment everything ended. Not when my face hit the cake. Not when the room went silent. Not even when he laughed. It ended when he looked at my pain and decided the problem was my reaction. I said, very calmly, "We're done." His face changed. The playful mask slipped. "You're breaking up with me over cake?" "No," I said. "I'm breaking up with you because you knew exactly where the line was, and you crossed it on purpose." He laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "You're pathetic." I didn't answer. He leaned closer and said, "Maybe you needed it. Maybe it'll toughen you up." For a few seconds, I just looked at him. This man who had once told me my scars were beautiful. This man who had promised he understood. This man who had turned my trauma into entertainment. Then I said, "Pack up whatever you have in my apartment. Leave the key on the counter. Don't contact me again." And I walked away. I drove around for almost 2 hours that night. No destination. Just movement. Streetlights sliding across the windshield. Music off. Hands tight around the steering wheel. I kept replaying the moment. The candles. The laughter that never came. Mason's hand pushing my head down. Then his voice. "Stop being such a baby about it." That sentence stayed with me more than the cake, because it sounded practiced. Too smooth. Too ready. I ended up at a 24-hour diner near the highway. Ordered coffee. Didn't drink most of it. Just sat there, staring at the window, while my body slowly remembered how to breathe. When I got home close to midnight, my phone was full. Missed calls. Texts. Messages. Marissa had written, "Gabby, are you okay? Call me." My mother sent, "Honey, I'm so sorry." Alex sent only 3 words. He crossed it. Then there was a message from my sister again. "Mason tried to keep the party going after you left. Nobody stayed long." I called her. She answered immediately. "Gabby? What happened after I left?" Silence. Then she sighed. "He acted like everything was fine." I closed my eyes. "Seriously?" "He kept saying you overreacted. Said you'd calm down." I pressed my fingers against my forehead. Marissa continued quietly. "Mom yelled at him." That surprised me. My mother hated conflict. What did she say? She told him a man who humiliates someone he claims to love isn't funny. I swallowed hard. And Alex? He called it messed up, right in front of everyone. I looked down at my hands. 8 months. That relationship had lasted 8 months. People would later say it was short, that maybe I ended it too fast. But it wasn't one moment. It was a decision. Then another. Then another. He chose to ignore my boundary. He chose to do it publicly. Then he chose to mock me afterward. And strangely, I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt lighter. 2 days later, I was cleaning the apartment. Party cups, gift bags, half-melted candles, the remains of a celebration that felt like it belonged to another woman. There was still a small stack of unopened gifts on the kitchen counter. One box sat underneath the others. Silver wrapping paper. I remembered Mason placing it there early in the evening. I opened it and froze. Inside was a baby bib.
Plastic.
Bright cartoon animals across the front. Underneath it sat a toddler sippy cup. At the bottom was a folded card. My hands suddenly felt cold. I opened it. On the front was a smiling cartoon baby. Inside, in Mason's handwriting, "For Gabriella, the most sensitive baby girl in the universe. Maybe this will help you grow up." I sat there for 10 minutes without moving, because this wasn't something he bought after the breakup. He planned it, wrapped it, brought it to my birthday, placed it with my gifts. Before the cake, before the humiliation, before the hallway. The whole thing had been planned. His words echoed back. Baby.
Pathetic.
Too sensitive. It sounded rehearsed, because it was. The cruelty hadn't happened in the moment. It had been packed in silver paper days earlier. My phone buzzed. Mason. Another message. Can we talk? Then, you're taking this way too far. Then, I talked to my ex-girlfriend Vanessa. Even she thinks you're being ridiculous. I stared at the screen. More messages came. Normal people laugh at stuff like that. You embarrassed me. You made everyone uncomfortable. You seriously need help if cake triggers you this much. I screenshotted everything. Not because I wanted revenge. Because suddenly, I didn't trust him. And when people start changing stories, proof matters. The messages kept coming. Long paragraphs.
Guilt. Insults. Self-pity.
I wasted so much effort on you. You always make things dramatic. You'll end up alone if you keep pushing people away. That night, I blocked his number. Blocked his social accounts. Blocked everything. The next morning, he made a new account. The message waiting there read, "You're manipulative for making me look bad." Not once. Not once. Did he mention my scars? Not once did he acknowledge the promise. Everything was about him. His embarrassment. His image. His joke. Alex came over that afternoon. I showed him the gift. He stared. What is that? I handed him the card. His expression changed immediately. Gabby. He planned it. Alex nodded slowly. He absolutely planned it. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because sometimes pain becomes so obvious it stops feeling real. I kept thinking maybe he just made a stupid choice. Alex put the card down. No. His voice was firm. This was intentional. My mother called later. I never liked how often he made you the joke, she said quietly. I frowned. What do you mean? He teased you constantly. I remembered. Little comments. Pranks. Stories told at dinners that made me uncomfortable while everyone laughed. I had always brushed them aside. Now they looked different. Like warning signs I painted over. 3 days later, I made a choice I'm not proud of. I packed the bib, the cup, the card, put them in a gift box. Added one extra thing. A small party popper. The kind that shoots paper streamers everywhere. Then I mailed it to Mason's office. I didn't think much would happen. I was wrong. Apparently, it arrived while coworkers were gathered around because the box looked expensive. Someone handed it to him. People watched. He opened it. The popper exploded. Streamers everywhere. Then he pulled out the baby bib. The room reportedly went silent, exactly like mine had. He called from another number within an hour. The second I answered, he exploded. "Are you insane?" I stayed quiet. "You humiliated me at work." His voice shook. "Everyone saw it." I let him finish. Then I said softly, "Now you know what it feels like." Silence. Heavy silence. Then more yelling. I hung up. Blocked that number, too. I sat on my couch afterward, the apartment quiet around me. And for the first time since the party, I didn't feel guilty. I felt understood. Because maybe it wasn't healthy. Maybe it wasn't mature. But it was honest. A mirror. And mirrors can hurt when people finally see themselves. I thought that was the end. I was wrong again. Because the next day, the internet found out. The video appeared online the next morning. Apparently, one of Mason's coworkers had recorded the whole thing. At first, they thought it was funny.
Fancy package.
Office crowd. Party popper. Then the baby bib came out. Then the card. Someone uploaded it. And it spread. Not everywhere. Not world-ending viral. But enough. Enough that people around him saw it. Enough that coworkers shared it. Enough that strangers started asking questions. Mason went nuclear. He posted stories. Long captions. Claims that I was abusive.
Manipulative. Obsessed.
He said I was stalking him. That I couldn't handle a harmless joke. That I had destroyed his life over nothing. I stared at the screen and felt tired. Not angry. Not shocked. Just tired. Because even now, even after everything, he was still protecting the version of himself that never did anything wrong. Then something unexpected happened. People from the party started commenting. Marissa wrote, "Tell them what happened first." Alex commented. She asked him not to do it. He promised, then did it anyway. My mother never comments online. Never. But that night, she did. Humiliation is not humor when only one person is laughing. Mason deleted the comments. Too late. Screenshots already existed. Then, 2 days later, I got a private message from his younger sister, Emily. We had only met twice. Her message said, "I'm sorry." That was it. Then another one. Mason told our family a completely different story. I didn't know the truth until people started asking questions. I stared at it for a long time. Because suddenly, I realized something. He wasn't just rewriting events for strangers. He was rewriting them everywhere. Family. Friends. Everyone. Anything except accountability. 2 weeks passed. The noise started fading. I thought it was finally over. Then one night, someone knocked on my door. I opened it. Mason stood there. He looked different. Hair messy. Eyes red.
Hoodie.
Sweatpants. Like someone who had stopped sleeping. The second he saw me, he started talking. The video, the comments, everything. Gabby, it's destroying me. I stayed by the doorway. You need to leave. Please. His voice cracked. I can't go to work without people whispering. I said nothing. He stepped past me anyway. Into my apartment. Like he still belonged there. My stomach tightened immediately. I'll do anything, he said. Public apology. Video. Statement. Anything. Just help me stop this. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And for a second, I almost felt sorry. Then I remembered frosting in my hair. The silence. The card. The baby bib. The months of little humiliations I had renamed personality. I can't stop it, I said quietly. His expression changed. What? I didn't post the video. His jaw tightened. Then tell people. Tell them what? That I'm not a monster. I held his gaze. Did you ever tell people about my boundary?
Silence.
Did you tell them about the scars? Nothing. Did you tell them you promised? His face hardened. Then it happened again. That shift. The same one from the hallway. The same coldness. He laughed once. Short.
Sharp.
God, Gabriella. You really destroyed everything over a prank. I felt my chest go still. There it is, I whispered. What? The real you. He stepped closer. You are weak. The words landed softly, almost gently. You always were. He pointed toward my face. You hide behind those scars like they make you special. For a second, the room disappeared. Not because it hurt. Because it confirmed everything. Every doubt. Every excuse I had made for him. Gone. I walked to the table. Picked up my phone. His eyes widened. What are you doing? You need to leave. I'm talking to you. You're trespassing. He laughed. I dialed anyway. The smile vanished. 20 minutes later, the police escorted him out. He kept looking back, like he still expected me to change my mind. I didn't. I didn't press charges. But they filed a report. After the door closed, I sat on my couch. The apartment felt strangely peaceful. No tension. No waiting. No wondering whether the next joke would become humiliation. A message came 2 days later. Another account. Another attempt. Hope you're happy. You destroyed someone who loved you. I blocked it without replying. Because by then, I understood something. Love doesn't look like contempt. Love doesn't weaponize trauma. Love doesn't humiliate you and then ask why you're bleeding. Weeks passed. I slept better. The quiet stopped feeling lonely. It started feeling safe. I heard later Mason took leave from work, moved back in with his parents. The internet eventually moved on. It always does. But not before consequences arrived. As for me, I moved forward. And I kept the card. Not out of pain. As a reminder. Lesson 1. A boundary is not a suggestion. If someone promises to respect it and breaks it intentionally, believe what that says. Lesson 2. The apology matters. But what comes after the harm matters more. Blame is not repair. Insults are not accountability. Lesson 3. Humiliation is not humor when only one person laughs, especially when the target begged for mercy first. Lesson 4. Save proof. Not for revenge, for protection. Because some people rewrite stories faster than they tell the truth. And lesson 5. Relief after a breakup is sometimes your body admitting what your heart refused to say. My name is Gabriella Hayes. I turned 32. And losing him was the best birthday gift I never expected. My name is Daphne Sterling. I'm 28 years old. Officially, I work as a data analyst. I spend my days buried in spreadsheets, forecasting models, and market reports people pretend to understand during meetings. It is the kind of career that sounds respectable, but forgettable.
Quiet.
Safe.
Invisible.
And for 3 years, invisible was exactly what I wanted to be. Because invisible people get to watch. Invisible people learn things. Invisible people hear truths others never mean to reveal. My boyfriend, Ethan Hastings, was 30. Kind eyes. Patient smile. The kind of man who apologized when other people hurt him. He was also the only son of Richard Hastings. In Chicago real estate circles, that name opened doors before introductions even happened. Developers knew it. Banks respected it. Society pages printed it. And for 3 years, that name had quietly hovered over our relationship like a shadow neither of us fully escaped. Ethan moved into my apartment 6 months after we started dating. The apartment was mine. Small. Warm. Nothing impressive. A third-floor unit with old windows and stubborn heating. The couch squeaked. The kitchen was tiny. The elevator broke at least once every month. Ethan loved it. Or at least he said he did. We cooked pasta at midnight, shared takeout containers on the floor, watched movies with blankets because the thermostat never worked correctly. He never complained. Not once. But I noticed things. The pause when his parents invited him back to the estate. The silence after family dinners. The way he sometimes stood at our window, looking at city lights, with an expression that looked suspiciously like grief. Because Richard and Victoria Hastings never accepted me. Not openly. They were too polished for open cruelty. Instead, they specialized in elegant humiliation. Little cuts. Perfectly measured. At dinners, Victoria would smile sweetly and say things like, "Sabrina just opened another investment office. Sabrina Cole, Ethan's ex-girlfriend. Beautiful.
Successful.
Everything society expected him to choose." Then Victoria would glance at me. "And what was it again you do, Daphne?" "Data analyst." Always the same answer. Always the same tiny nod afterward. Richard preferred silence. He would discuss acquisitions with Ethan's cousins, invite investors into private rooms, talk markets, talk growth, talk legacy. And somehow, I always ended up near the children's table.
Invisible. Underestimated. Ignored.
The irony was almost beautiful. Because the company Richard proudly discussed every night existed partly because of me. 8 years earlier, I bought shares in Hastings Development.
Quietly.
Patiently. Through layers of holding companies. At 24, fresh out of MIT with a degree in financial engineering and inheritance money from my grandfather, I had seen something everyone else missed. Richard's company was bleeding. The market saw weakness. I saw opportunity. Good assets. Bad cash flow.
Temporary fear.
I bought. Then bought more. Year after year. Now I owned 47%. Enough to remove Richard from his own boardroom. Enough to change everything. And nobody knew. Not even Ethan. Meeting him had never been part of any strategy. We met at a charity gala. Both hiding near the bar. Both escaping boring people. He made fun of society speeches. I admitted I hated formal forks, because I never knew which one belonged where. He laughed so hard he nearly spilled his drink. 3 hours later, he asked for my number. Then he warned me. "Fair warning," he said softly. "My family is obsessed with status." I smiled. Money doesn't define character. He stared at me a little too long, then smiled back. 3 years later, he still looked at me that same way. Tuesday morning, everything shifted. Ethan slid his phone across the breakfast table. "Dinner Friday," he said quietly. "Mom says it's important." His voice had that tightness again. "The one family caused." "Just us four?" He nodded. I already knew what that meant. Formal dinner.
Private invitation.
No cousins. No social guests. No audience. Richard had decided it was time to deal with the problem. The problem was me. Ethan sat down beside me. "Maybe we shouldn't go." I looked up. He seemed tired. More tired than 30 should look. "When my parents get formal," he whispered, "they're planning something." I reached for his hand. "We're going." He looked surprised. "Why?" Because I wanted to see how far they would go. Because truth always arrived, eventually. Because powerful people revealed themselves when they thought nobody important was watching. Friday came cold and bright. The Hastings estate stood exactly as I remembered. 3 acres. Stone walls. Perfect gardens. More museum than home. Ethan squeezed my hand before we rang the bell. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "I choose you." My chest tightened. Because he meant it. Even now. Even believing I was ordinary. Victoria opened the door herself. "Ethan, darling." Then her eyes moved to me. "Daphne." My name sounded like something bitter. Dinner began politely. Too politely.
Soup.
Wine. Safe conversation. Ethan's nonprofit work. Richard's newest development. I played my role. Asked questions. Stayed quiet. Then plates disappeared. Richard reached beside him and placed a leather folder onto the table. The room changed. His voice changed too. Boardroom voice. Cold.
Controlled.
Daphne, he said, we need to discuss Ethan's future. Under the table, Ethan grabbed my hand. Victoria folded her napkin. He sacrificed a great deal for this relationship. Ethan stiffened. Mom. Please let us finish. Richard opened the folder, then pushed it toward me. Inside sat a check. $500,000. Clipped above legal papers. Ethan went completely still. Richard smiled. Small.
Satisfied.
Like he had already won. Daphne, he said calmly, you seem like a decent woman. But Ethan chose beneath his station. The room froze. Victoria lowered her eyes. We think it's time to fix that. I looked down at the check. $500,000.
A price tag.
Not for me. For love. For Ethan. For us. And neither of them knew the woman sitting across from them quietly owned almost half their empire. The silence stretched. Nobody moved. The crystal glasses reflected the dining room lights like tiny pieces of ice. Ethan looked from the check to his father, then to me, then back again. What is this? He asked quietly. Richard leaned back. It's a solution. No, Ethan said. His voice sharpened. It's a bribe. Victoria inhaled softly, as if he had embarrassed her. Ethan, please don't dramatize this. Don't dramatize it? He laughed once, disbelieving. You invited us here and put a price on my relationship. Richard didn't even look at him. His eyes stayed on me. Daphne understands how the world works. I felt Ethan's hand tighten beneath the table. For a moment, I remembered another dinner. Thanksgiving, 2 years earlier. Richard had spent 20 straight minutes explaining real estate basics to me as though I were a child. I had smiled through all of it. On the drive home, Ethan sat in silence, then suddenly asked, "Why do you let them do that?" I remembered his face illuminated by passing streetlights. The disappointment. The guilt. Because deep down, he knew. He knew they were hurting me. And he hated it. I had only answered, sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one nobody notices. Back then, he thought it was humility. It wasn't. It was strategy. Richard pushed the folder closer. This is $500,000, he said. Enough to start over. Victoria added softly, You're young, intelligent, you'll recover.
Recover.
As if loving Ethan had been damage. I looked at the annulment papers. The irony almost made me smile. 500,000. The company's quarterly catering budget was larger. The estate around us existed partly because of capital I provided. The chandelier above us probably existed because of my money. Yet here they sat, trying to buy me out like some opportunist. Across the table, Ethan suddenly stood. His chair scraped hard against the floor. No. One word. Sharp enough to cut glass. Richard frowned. Sit down. No. Ethan's eyes were bright now.
Angry.
Hurt. You don't get to do this. Victoria rose slightly. Sweetheart, we're trying to help. Help who? His voice cracked. Me? Her? Yourselves? The room froze. I had seen Ethan upset before. Never like this. Never openly. Never against them. He looked at me. And for 1 second, I saw fear. Not anger. Fear. Fear I might actually take the money. Fear I might leave. The thought hit me harder than it should have. Because after everything, he still loved me enough to be afraid of losing me. I lowered my eyes to the check again. 8 years. 8 years of silence. 8 years watching. 8 years building an empire behind a modest apartment and an old life. There had been moments I almost told him. The night he cried quietly after Richard introduced Sabrina at a charity event as the woman who should have been family. The weekend he apologized because his mother gifted him luxury watches while handing me a bookstore gift card. The Christmas dinner where Richard toasted Ethan's future potential while carefully excluding me from every sentence. I almost told him every time. I never did. Because once wealth enters love, you can never remove the question. Would they still choose you? Would they still stay? Would they still see you? I reached for my phone. Ethan blinked. Daphne? Richard folded his hands. If you need time to think. I don't. I unlocked my phone. I just need to make a call. Victoria frowned. To who? I stood slowly. My attorney. Silence. Richard actually smiled. A small, amused smile, as if this confirmed everything he believed. Attorney, he repeated. Over $500,000? I dialed. The call connected immediately. Marcus Reed speaking. His calm voice filled my ear. Marcus, I said evenly. I'm having dinner with the Hastings family. Pause. Then, I understand. His tone changed instantly. Professional. Focused. Could you pull the ownership structure for Hastings Development? Across the table, Richard frowned. What exactly is this? I ignored him. Speakerphone, please. Marcus complied. The room filled with his voice. Current ownership structure for Hastings Development Corporation. Richard leaned forward. Victoria looked confused. Ethan stared at me. Total outstanding shares? 100 million. Richard's expression didn't change. The largest shareholder is NC Holdings. That made him pause. 47 million shares. 47% ownership. The next largest shareholder is Richard Hastings with 18%. Remaining shares distributed among institutional investors. Richard frowned. What does this have to do with? I interrupted quietly. Marcus. Yes? Who owns NC Holdings? The room stopped breathing. Marcus answered without hesitation. NC Holdings is wholly owned by Daphne Sterling. Nobody moved. It was established 8 years ago as her primary investment vehicle. Victoria blinked. Ethan stared. Richard went still. Marcus continued. Current valuation of Ms. Sterling's holdings in Hastings Development is approximately $10.8 billion. The sound that left Victoria wasn't quite a gasp, more like air disappearing. Ethan's lips parted. Richard looked at me as if he no longer recognized the person sitting there. No, he whispered. No. I picked up the check, held it between 2 fingers. This, I said softly, is $500,000. Nobody answered. You offered me this to leave Ethan. Richard's face had lost all color. Marcus kept speaking. With 47% ownership, Ms. Sterling is effectively the controlling shareholder. He paused. She possesses sufficient voting influence to remove executive leadership during board proceedings. Richard looked like someone had struck him. You... His voice cracked. You own NC Holdings? Yes. You own the company? I own 47%. Victoria's eyes filled. But... She looked around the room helplessly. You're a data analyst. I am. You live in that apartment. Yes. You drive that terrible car. I almost smiled. Yes. Ethan finally spoke. Very softly. You knew? I turned toward him. His eyes weren't angry. Not yet. Just shocked. You knew all this? I nodded once. Yes. The room felt colder. Richard stood abruptly. This isn't possible. It is. You let us believe. You never asked. His mouth opened.
Closed.
Opened again. 8 years of confidence shattered in seconds. I stood. Slowly.
Calmly.
The River North project? I looked at Richard. My capital. The Lakeshore expansion?
Silence.
My funding. The office parks that saved your company after the downturn? I met his eyes. Mine! Victoria sat down hard. Ethan looked between us. Between his family. Between the woman he thought he knew. And the stranger suddenly standing before him. He whispered my name. Daphne. The room had changed. Nothing would ever return to what it was. And somewhere inside that silence, the woman they called not good enough had finally stepped into the light. Nobody sat back down. The dining room felt smaller somehow, like the walls themselves had moved closer. Richard remained standing beside his chair, staring at me with the expression of a man watching his own history rearrange itself. Victoria's fingers trembled around her wine glass. Ethan still hadn't moved. He was looking at me. Only me. And there was something in his eyes I had never seen before. Not fear. Not anger. Loss. Like the version of me he knew had suddenly disappeared. Why? He asked quietly. The question cut deeper than anything Richard had said all night. I turned toward him. What do you mean? Why didn't you tell me? His voice shook. You let me believe. He stopped. I already knew the ending of that sentence. You let me believe you were ordinary. The truth was harder. I let him believe I was powerless. Because powerless people receive honesty. Powerful people receive performances. I looked down. I almost told you. His eyes flickered. Many times. Richard suddenly found his voice again. This was all planned. He pointed at me. You manipulated us. I looked back at him. No. You infiltrated my company. I invested in it. You hid everything. You never asked. His face reddened. Victoria finally spoke. But why hide it? Her mascara had begun to blur. You could have lived anywhere, done anything. Why that apartment? Why pretend? Because I wasn't pretending. My voice came out softer than expected. I love my work. I like our apartment. I like simple dinners. I glanced at Ethan. And I loved him before any of this mattered. Silence. Then Ethan laughed once. Short. Broken. You loved me enough to hide $10 billion? His smile vanished immediately. Do you know how many nights I worried? The room stilled again. He looked at me. Raw. Open. My parents kept saying you'd hold me back. His voice cracked. And I defended us because I thought we were struggling together. I felt that one. Deep. Because he had. Every single time. At every dinner. Every insult. Every comparison to Sabrina. He had chosen me. Even believing I had nothing. I stepped toward him. I know. Do you? Tears stood in his eyes now. You watched them humiliate you. He swallowed. You watched me apologize for them. Another step. You watched me feel guilty for having more. His voice dropped to almost nothing. And you said nothing. The room blurred for a second. Because he wasn't wrong. I had watched. I had waited. I had measured people like balance sheets. And somewhere in that process, I had hurt the person I loved. I needed to know, I whispered. His eyes lifted. What? If love survives without status. He stared. I needed to know if you loved me without money. His expression softened slightly. But I also needed to know who your family was. I turned toward Richard. And now I know. Richard looked away. No. I shook my head. Yes. I moved beside the table. 8 years ago, your company was collapsing. Banks refused you. Investors were leaving. Projects were dying. I looked directly at him. And someone kept buying.
Silence.
Someone kept funding. Victoria lowered her head. Someone kept believing your company was worth saving. I paused. That someone was me. Richard sat down slowly, like his knees no longer worked. The River North Tower, I continued. My capital. The Lakeshore redevelopment. My financing. The office parks during the downturn. My money. He covered his mouth. The great Richard Hastings suddenly looked old. Very old. You saved us. The words barely came out. I nodded. Yes. Then why do this? I looked at him. Because tonight you offered money to make me disappear. He flinched. You decided my value before knowing me. Victoria began crying openly now. We thought you wanted access. I laughed quietly.
Access.
The woman funding their empire wanted access. The irony almost hurt. I wanted family. Nobody spoke. I wanted parents. My voice lowered. I wanted holidays without judgment. I looked at Victoria. I wanted you to ask what made me happy, instead of comparing me to Sabrina. She cried harder. I wanted someone to ask who I was. The room shattered into silence again. Then my phone vibrated. Marcus. Still waiting. I answered. Yes? Board notifications are prepared. Richard jerked upward. What? Marcus continued calmly. Emergency board session scheduled Monday morning. Agenda. Vote regarding executive leadership. Richard stood again. No. He looked at me. You wouldn't. Wouldn't? The memory hit me suddenly. Kids' table. Thanksgiving. His hand dismissing me. Victoria introducing Sabrina again. The envelope. The check. Ethan standing alone. I met his eyes. I already did. His face drained. You're removing me? No. I said quietly. Your choices are... Victoria gasped. This is revenge. I turned toward her. No. Revenge would be destroying everything. I picked up the check. Held it between both hands. This?
Rip.
Paper tore through the room. I dropped the pieces onto the table. I don't want your money. Another piece fell. I never did. I looked at Ethan. I wanted him. The last piece dropped. And I wanted this family to love him more than status. Richard sat down hard. The king of the empire. The man who once decided people's worth in a glance. Broken by paper. Ethan walked toward me. Slowly. His eyes still red. You really chose this life? I nodded. Our apartment? Yes. The old couch? I almost smiled. Yes. The broken elevator? I laughed softly through tears. Yes. He stared another second, then took my hand.
Firmly.
I choose you too, Victoria sobbed. Richard closed his eyes. I turned toward the door. Come on. Ethan followed. Behind us, Richard's voice came out small. Daphne. We stopped. He looked up. Not powerful anymore. Just human. I'm sorry. I held his gaze. For the first time in 3 years, I believed he meant it. But some truths arrived too late. We walked out together. Cold autumn air hit my face. The estate glowed behind us. Beautiful.
Massive.
Empty. Inside that house, a billionaire empire was collapsing. Outside it, 2 people stood holding hands. And somehow, that felt worth more. The drive home was silent. Chicago lights moved across the windshield in long ribbons of gold. The old car hummed beneath us. The same car Victoria hated. The same car Ethan defended every time his parents mocked it. Tonight, it felt different. Nothing had changed. And everything had changed. My hand stayed on the wheel. Ethan stared out the window. I knew that silence. It wasn't anger anymore. It was rebuilding. Finally, he spoke. Did you ever trust me? The question hit harder than the envelope. I looked at him. What? You trusted me enough to love me. He kept watching the city, but not enough to tell me. I swallowed. That isn't true. Then what is? His voice stayed calm. Too calm. The dangerous kind. I pulled into a quiet street and stopped the car. Streetlights reflected across the glass. I turned toward him. I was afraid. He finally looked at me. For the first time that night, surprise crossed his face. Afraid? Yes. My voice shook. If I told you on our first date that I controlled billions. I laughed softly. Would you have believed I wanted coffee because I liked you? He didn't answer. If I told your parents? I stared ahead. They would have loved me immediately. Silence. And then I would never know if that love was real. Ethan lowered his eyes. I wanted one thing in my life untouched by money. The words came quietly now. I wanted us. He looked down at our joined hands. I spent 3 years thinking you stayed because you loved me, without gain. I squeezed his fingers. I did. He smiled faintly. Turns out we were both doing the same thing. We sat there a long moment. Then suddenly he laughed. Soft. Broken. Relieved. You really own almost half my father's company. I nodded. Yes. You're worth 10 billion. Approximately. He leaned back. My God. Then he turned toward me again. Are we moving? I blinked. What? To some penthouse? I smiled for the first time all night. No. The apartment stays. He laughed. The broken elevator too? Yes. The squeaky couch? Yes. He leaned over and kissed my forehead. Good. Because he loved that life. And maybe that was why I loved him. We drove home. Our apartment felt exactly the same. Tiny kitchen. Warm lights. Shoes near the door. Reality. Ethan stood in the middle of the living room, looking around. $10 billion. He shook his head. You know what I want? What? He smiled. New pans! I laughed so hard I nearly cried. The next morning we sat at our little table. Coffee. Toast. Normal. Almost. What happens now? He asked. To the company? I thought about it. The company survives. And your father? The pause lingered. He won't stay CEO. Ethan nodded slowly. No argument. Just sadness. He built that company. I know. He also nearly destroyed it. He closed his eyes and accepted the truth. Monday came. Board meeting. Conference room. Votes. Silence. Richard Hastings was removed as CEO. Interim leadership installed. Restructuring approved. The market responded positively. Stock rose before noon. I left before reporters arrived. At home, Ethan sat on the couch holding his phone. 17 missed calls. All from Victoria. He never answered. That evening, a certified envelope arrived. He stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a handwritten letter. His voice trembled while reading. Ethan. He stopped. Started again. Ethan, I do not expect forgiveness. He swallowed. What we did was wrong. Silence. We thought Daphne wanted your name. He looked up at me. We were wrong. His eyes watered. Your father is devastated. The room grew quiet. Not because of the company. His voice broke. Because he thinks he lost you. He folded the paper slowly. Do you believe her? I asked gently. He looked toward the window. I don't know. Long pause. I want to. I sat beside him. You can. He turned. What? You can forgive them. His eyes widened. After everything? Yes. I smiled softly. Forgiveness isn't permission. It's boundaries. He looked at me for a long time, then smiled sadly. You're impossible. Probably. He laughed, then reached for his phone. Message drafted. Dinner. Friday. Our apartment. No dress code. No expectations. Just family. He showed it to me. Too much? I shook my head. Perfect. Friday arrived quietly. Victoria came first. No designer dress. Simple sweater.
Minimal makeup.
She looked smaller, somehow.
Human.
Richard arrived 10 minutes later.
Jeans. Dark sweater.
No driver. No performance. He stood outside our apartment door, awkwardly holding flowers.
Flowers.
For us. The same man who once slid money across a table. I opened the door. He looked at me. Not as an obstacle. Not as beneath him. Just as a person. Thank you for letting us come. We ate pasta. At our tiny table. 4 plates. No crystal. No servants. Only silence and steam rising from bowls. Finally, Richard spoke. I owe you an apology. He looked at me. For every dinner. For every comparison. For every time I treated you as less. His eyes lowered. And for believing your worth had a number. Victoria cried quietly beside him. Then Richard turned to Ethan. The room stopped. I failed you. Ethan froze. I wanted success for you. His voice cracked. But I confused success with status. He looked down. You found someone extraordinary. His eyes moved to me. And I punished you for it. Tears slid down Ethan's face. He didn't wipe them away. Victoria reached for his hand. I spent your whole life preparing you for a different future. Her voice shook. When you chose Daphne, she smiled sadly. I thought I was losing you. Ethan whispered. You almost did. She cried. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. Because some truths deserve silence. Nobody spoke for a while after Ethan's words. You almost did. The sentence stayed in the room. Heavy. Honest. Richard looked older than I had ever seen him. Not because he lost the company. Because he realized how close he had come to losing his son. Victoria wiped her eyes. I know. Her voice barely existed. And if I could undo that night, she looked at me. I would. The apartment felt strangely warm. Our tiny dining table. The mismatched plates. The old lamp in the corner. Everything Richard and Victoria once would have judged. Now they sat inside it quietly. Learning. Ethan finally reached across the table. His mother grabbed his hand immediately. Like she was afraid he might disappear again. I'm not promising everything goes back to normal, he said softly. Richard nodded. It shouldn't. Silence. Then Richard turned toward me. Daphne. I looked up. I'd like to ask something. I waited. Lunch. He smiled weakly. Just us. Ethan blinked. Richard looked embarrassed. I spent 3 years deciding who you were without ever asking. He lowered his eyes. I'd like to know the woman my son loves. The room went quiet again. I looked at Ethan. He nodded once. Small.
Encouraging. I smiled.
Lunch sounds good. Relief crossed Richard's face so quickly it almost hurt to watch. Because this man, who once seemed untouchable, suddenly looked like someone asking for another chance. 3 months later, Hastings' development looked different. The restructuring succeeded. The market responded. Stock climbed nearly 40%. Richard stayed as senior advisor. No executive authority. No final vote. Just experience. And surprisingly, He accepted it. The foundation Ethan and I created launched that same season.
Scholarships.
Community centers. Business education programs. Mentorship grants. The first project carried my grandfather's name. The second carried Ethan's. He cried when he saw it. Why mine? Because he had spent 3 years loving someone he thought had nothing. That deserved honoring. His nonprofit expanded too. New offices. New staff. More programs. Every week, he came home exhausted and smiling. Happy. Really happy. Richard and Victoria started visiting every other Friday. No announcements. No grand entrances. Just family dinners. Pasta. Soup.
Takeout.
Normal things. One evening, Richard arrived carrying grocery bags. Ethan opened the door. What's this? Richard smiled awkwardly. I thought I'd cook. We all stared. Victoria laughed through embarrassment. He watched cooking videos all afternoon. Dinner was terrible. The pasta was overcooked. The sauce burned. We ate everything anyway. Because effort matters. Months passed. The business press tried chasing the story. The hidden investor. The woman behind NC Holdings. I refused almost every interview. That dinner was never about headlines. It was about values. One cold evening, Ethan and I sat on our balcony. City lights stretched beneath us. The same lights we watched years ago when we had nothing except each other. He leaned against me. Do you regret it? I looked over. What? Waiting. His eyes stayed on the skyline, letting them underestimate you. I thought about it. The kids' table. Sabrina comparisons. The envelope. The check. The silence afterward. No. He smiled. Not once? I shook my head. Because now we know. He looked at me. We know what? That you loved me before money. His hand tightened around mine. That your parents learned. I smiled softly. And that I never needed anyone's approval. He laughed quietly. Who are you, Daphne Sterling? I looked at the lights below. I'm a data analyst. He smiled. I'm an investor. He smiled wider. I'm the woman your parents tried to buy out of your life. He laughed. And? I leaned closer. I'm your girlfriend. He kissed my forehead. The city shimmered below us. Somewhere across town, Richard was probably studying market reports again. Somewhere, Victoria was likely planning next Friday's dinner. And here, inside our small apartment, the one we never left, the one we chose, we had everything that mattered. Love. Truth. Second chances. Because in the end, the envelope didn't change our lives. It revealed them. Lesson 1. When someone puts a price on love, they reveal how they measure people. Believe them. Lesson 2. Being underestimated is sometimes power wearing ordinary clothes. Lesson 3. Humiliation fades. Character remains. Lesson 4. Money can rescue companies. Only people can rescue values. Lesson 5. You do not always need revenge to win. Sometimes boundaries, truth, and love are enough. Ethan rested his head against mine. The city glowed beneath us. And for the first time in years, nothing was hidden anymore.